Chapter 11:21. Yi Yuxuan calmly fed Wei Wei Bai. It was as natural as feeding a small animal. Wei Wei Bai felt that she should pull herself together. She couldn't let the other party control her rhythm. 30 days of life points did increase, but it didn't increase. She didn't move. The days of lying down and being fed life points were gone forever. Wei Wei Bai was already tired enough in this world. In fact, she really wanted to live peacefully with Yi Yuxuan. She didn't want to cause so much trouble. But the reality was that if she didn't cause trouble, her life points wouldn't increase. Wei Wei Bai silently pondered. Suddenly she said, "Yi Yuxuan, do you have experience?" Yi Yuxuan was cleaning up the dishes. She looked like a good wife and mother. Although she looked a little cold, she was a little handsome. But the things she did were very virtuous. When he heard Wei Wei Bai's question, he was a little slow. When he understood what she was saying, there was a slight fluctuation on his face. She didn't know if it was shyness. Anyway, that expression flashed by. Wei Wei Bai didn't have Yi Yuxuan's ability to observe people, so she tacitly agreed that she didn't see it. Yi Yuxuan pushed the dishes to the side and then sat beside Wei Wei Bai. He was wearing casual clothes, so he felt more relaxed. His voice was faint, like the leaves on the tree. "Are you asking about the experience of sharing a bed?" Wei Wei Bai choked and then ate a piece of fruit after eating. Then she said seriously, "Sharing a bed, making love." If Yi Yuxuan naively thought that sharing a bed was just for sleeping, it wouldn't be good. Yi Yuxuan looked at her silently. There was a gentle emotion in his eyes. Then Wei Wei Bai heard him say, "Yes." Wei Wei Bai asked this question purely to tease Yi Yuxuan. Who didn't know that Yi Yuxuan lived like a robot? There was a time when Wei Wei Bai even thought that this man was an alien. He was just wearing the skin of an earthling, so he looked at humans as if they were ants. Can a human and an ant share a bed together? Could aliens share a bed with humans? So would Yi Yuxuan have the experience of sharing a bed with other women? It shouldn't. Bai Wei Wei was still holding a half-eaten apple in her hand. She stared at him in a rare daze. Yi Yuxuan actually had experience? Bai Wei Wei didn't know if it was an accident or something else, but she suddenly felt an uncomfortable sour feeling in her heart. She forced a smile and said, "I can't tell. When did this happen? When was it?" During the time when they were engaged, it should have been impossible. Even if she didn't pay much attention to Yi Yuxuan, she knew that Yi Yuxuan didn't have any female animals around him at that time. Yi Yuxuan looked at her quietly. He seemed to see the subtle changes in her expression. He smiled gently. He had never felt this way before. She was unhappy. He actually felt happy. Human emotions were really complicated. Once again, he felt an unfamiliar surge of emotion. He did something that he wouldn't do logically. Yi Yuxuan said softly with a relaxed tone, "Recently." Wei Wei Bai, recently? Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. "How recently?" Yi Yuxuan, "These few days." Wei Wei Bai, she asked the system softly, "Is this considered cheating?" The system was very careful. It said almost in a whisper, "You broke off the engagement." Wei Wei Bai thought about it and agreed. She couldn't increase her life points just because Yi Yuxuan liked her. To record this reading. Chapter 11:22. She would have to be blind to not notice his gaze. The more indifferent a man was, the more impactful his gaze was when it was burning. Wei Wei Bai was also someone who had experienced big scenes. She swallowed this damn apple that was especially hard to swallow. She almost choked herself to death. Yi Yuxuan suddenly held the picnic cloth with his hand, leaned forward, and reached out to touch Wei Wei Bai's lips. It stained. Wei Wei Bai immediately caught the flaw and sneered. "The apple isn't stained. I've already eaten it." It wasn't a cream cake. If there were really apple crumbs on it, how could she not know? This was a clumsy way to take advantage of her. Yi Yuxuan blinked calmly, and his expression was very puzzled. "Your lips are stained with saliva." Wei Wei Bai, "Wasn't it disgusting to say this?" Yi Yuxuan said calmly, "Also, you can't wipe your fingers clean." Wei Wei Bai frowned. Just as she was about to reach out and wipe it herself, the arm that she had just raised was pressed down by him. He had already leaned over and kissed her lips. There was a faint apple fragrance on his lips. Wei Weibai felt that her experience of big scenes was not reliable. Without the emotional shield, her heart did not belong to her at all. She could not control the speed of her heartbeat. She could not control the stiffness of her body and the instinctive reaction of not being able to dodge. He kissed her quietly and gently. The contact between the lips and teeth was careful and affectionate. This kiss had the taste of fruits and the fragrance of trees. There was also the faint and cold aura on Yi Yuxuan's body. Just like that, he took away all her rights to struggle. Wei Weibai did not even know when it would end. She looked at him blankly and saw that his eyes were gentle and smiling. Yi Yuxuan rarely smiled, but every time he did, it made people feel that this man was glowing. His breath brushed past her lips, and his voice came slowly. My experience is all from dreams. After all, men have needs, but they don't want to scare you, so they can only do whatever they want to you in the dream to satisfy their needs. Surprisingly, there was an unnoticeable smile in his words. Wei Weibai, Yi Yuxuan reiterated, my body is still a virgin. You can test it. I'm very young. Wei Weibai felt that she had been won over by Yi Yuxuan. The rhythm of the battle had been completely taken away. The opponent's skill level was too high. For the first time, she realized that she was actually a weakling without a cheat. Yi Yuxuan completely crushed her. She shifted her hips and distanced herself from Yi Yuxuan. I believe that you are inexperienced. There is no need to verify it. This was the first time she had been so cowardly. Facing Yi Yuxuan, she actually couldn't bring herself to be tough. When she didn't have feelings, she was like the sun, the earth, and the air. When she had feelings, she didn't dare to be with Yi Yuxuan for days. Wei Weibai felt that she wasn't scumbag enough. She should be so scumbag that she could kick Yi Yuxuan away even if he was a freeloader. She was scared and wanted to retreat, but Yi Yuxuan was closing in on her. Why did you treat others like that just now? His voice was clearly calm, but it gave people a deep sense of questioning. Wei Weibai even felt that if she didn't answer well, Yi Yuxuan would become evil. She observed Yi Yuxuan and found that he was still extremely calm. She couldn't see any other emotions at all. The robot's description was not wrong at all. Wei Weibai laughed dryly. It's just a joke. Yi Yuxuan didn't answer and looked at her deeply. To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click. Chapter 11:23. She felt the strength of his tongue between his teeth and finally couldn't help but say, I think a normal life is quite good, excitement is not good for the heart. She was going to have a heart attack. Yi Yuxuan's fingers gently touched her neck. His tone finally changed. You know that your heart is not good, don't look for excitement anywhere in the future. Wei Weibai quickly nodded. He seemed to like her obedience very much. The cold darkness in his eyes faded, and he gently let go of her. I'll get someone to clean up the villa here, then we'll go back. Yi Yuxuan touched her hair, then got up and walked to the assistant, calmly giving orders. Wei Weibai felt that she was completely suppressed by Yi Yuxuan. Even when he approached her, goosebumps appeared on her back. In the past, she was so ignorant and fearless to get close to him and flirt with him. She felt that ever since she had a slightly different feeling towards Yi Yuxuan, she could completely feel the turbulent undercurrent of his calm temperament. The more she interacted with Yi Yuxuan, the more she felt that this man could let her do whatever she wanted in the past. It was because he indulged her. Thinking of this, Wei Weibai felt that she was really very perfect. Even Yi Yuxuan, who was so strong, was willing to tolerate her. The system heard Wei Weibai talking to it about how perfect she was. It really didn't want to remind her about her life points. But Wei Weibai was not so easy to fool. How much is your life points? The system said, it's full, 1,500, plus the 20 days you got from the strategy, it's a total of 150,020 days. Wei Weibai said, I've been in the strategy for so long, risking my life, abandoning my integrity, my face, and my soul have been tarnished, so I only have 20 days of life points after so many worlds. And the days Yi Yuxuan gave her was already 1,500. She suddenly wondered why she was in such a miserable state. The system stroked his hair and said, that's also a strategy. Isn't the strategy to defeat Yi Yuxuan also a strategy? This was also the host's ability. Originally, it thought that its host would shamelessly praise it like before, and at the same time, praise itself to its heart's content. But this time, Wei Wei Bai was silent. Then she said, "Let's go." The system said, "Aren't you in too much of a rush? You're entering the next realm so soon?" The host was getting more and more anxious. Wei Wei Bai had a rare melancholy look on her face. "I can't always face Yushuan." The system asked, "Are you afraid that he'll absorb your life points?" Wei Wei Bai, "Am I the kind of person who only thinks about HP?" The system replied, "Yes." Wei Wei Bai, she couldn't deny it, so she simply didn't respond. Instead, she softly voiced her thoughts. "I have to complete the strategy before I have any shameless thoughts about Yushuan. Otherwise, I might not be able to transmigrate in the future." The system asked, "Why?" "I'll always be here. At most, I'll be interrupted when you do those shameless things with Yushuan. I can still bring you there when you transmigrate." Wei Wei Bai slowly shook her head. "That's not the reason. If I really like a man, then wouldn't it be cheating if I go after another man? If I really like Yushuan, I won't transmigrate anymore." Cheating was something that Wei Wei Bai couldn't tolerate, whether it was her partner or herself. Right now, she only had some vague thoughts about Yushuan, but it wasn't enough for them to truly love each other. She couldn't go any deeper. TXT download to make it easier for you to read next time. You can click Save below to record this reading record. Chapter 1125. Are you harassing O Jinma because you like him too much? I heard you're pregnant. What a lunatic. Wei Wei Bai hadn't felt such a warm welcome in a long time. In the past, the target would only have a negative impression of her. Why did it feel like the whole world had negative impression of her? The doctor didn't seem to have a good expression either. He shouted angrily, "What do you think the hospital is? Get out. Who can take responsibility if something happens to the patient?" The doctor was a tall man with a handsome face. He looked very decent. Did Wei Wei Bai think that this was the target? She couldn't help but look at his name tag. Su Yehua. After a series of tests, she was hospitalized. The paparazzi were also blocked outside the hospital. During this time, no one came to see her. The system had transmitted memories because she had a concussion. It would cause headaches and aggravate the symptoms of the concussion. So it didn't transmit the information. It simply explained her identity in this world. She was a mediocre singer who wanted to enter the entertainment industry and hadn't debuted yet. The specific memories hadn't entered her brain yet. Wei Wei Bai was also happy to rest. After resting for about a day and a half, the nurse prepared porridge and side dishes for her. The nurse's attitude was very bad. Although her actions were normal, her expression was very dark. It seemed like she hated her very much. Bai Weiwei was very calm about other people's supercilious looks. Supercilious looks were on other people's faces, she couldn't dig them out. She lowered her head and quietly ate the porridge. Suddenly, the door of the ward opened. Weiwei Bai looked up casually. She saw a man wearing sunglasses. His expression was very cold. His exposed jaw was tense and had a murderous aura. He wore tight black pants and a large black crane jacket. He even carried a guitar bag on his back. His whole person was like an unsheathed sword. His clean and neat beauty had a charm that directly hit people's hearts. The system finally reminded her. This mission is to obtain O Jinma's love. Target, O Jinma. Completion, 0. Time, 12 months. A year's time was very generous. Weiwei Bai felt a familiar feeling of memories entering her mind. She was already used to this kind of pain, so Weiwei Bai watched calmly as O Jinma walked in. After she finished looking through the memories, she wanted to curse him but kept it in her mouth. In the end, she choked up with a pitiful voice. Jinma. O Jinma took off his sunglasses, revealing his amber eyes. Her eyes were as beautiful as honey flowing under the sun. The media once wrote that if there were angels in this century, then this angel must be O Jinma. O Jinma was a true international superstar. A man who had completely turned the weak music industry in the country upside down and changed it. He had beautiful skin that was as cold as snow. His flawless appearance was so exquisite that it made people gasp in amazement. Clearly, because of his overly exquisite facial features, he had incomparably cold, offensive power. But because of a pair of overly warm eyes, he was like an angel that had fallen into the mortal world. Anyone who saw him would feel that he was the most perfect man in the world. It wasn't that Wei Bai wanted to use such a disgusting and lengthy description to fill up the word count. But in her memory, there were even more shameless descriptions than this. This Oh Jinma was simply the darling of the media, the savior of the music industry. The memories of him in her mind were all these crazy and immoral praises. Her mind had never been stuffed with so many praises. Wei Bai felt that she had indigestion because they were all praises for others. Chapter 11:26. With so many praises for this man, her relationship with Oh Jinma didn't seem so obvious. Oh Jinma walked over. His amber eyes didn't have the warmth of the media's praises. There was only a layer of ice. Wei Bai, that's enough. You framed my sister and exposed our relationship. You're crazy for fame. Wei Bai still had a mouthful of porridge in her mouth. To not ruin her acting, she immediately swallowed it. Then she put on a serious expression. Believe me, I didn't frame her. She really plagiarized. Oh Jinma frowned impatiently. That's enough. I'm here to tell you that my relationship with you is over. Ding, the male lead's favorability is -35. The familiar formula, the familiar favorable impression points. Wei Bai laughed. Her relationship with Oh Jinma was like this. Oh Jinma's character was set up by someone. His character was an angel of the music industry. For a grown man to stick to such a character, he was simply crazy. This illness started when he was young. The original owner and Oh Jinma were neighbors. At that time, she was called Wei Bai and her nickname was Xiaohua. Oh Jinma was called Oh Dashu and his nickname was Big Tree. Yes, they were the village flower and village grass respectively. Oh Jinma was beautiful when he was young. The village grass was prettier than the village flower. Because he was fostered, he used his beauty to pretend to be sensible and cute to survive. Because of this, he lived well. With this character of pretending to be obedient, when he grew up, he pretended to be pure in the music industry and didn't understand the world. One didn't understand the world, but was overflowing with talent. His voice was like being kissed by God. He was also a singer who could write his own songs. He was simply a rare treasure. Oh Jinma especially enjoyed the convenience and vanity of his character. He was addicted to pretending to be an angel. Almost no one knew how hypocritical his character was. But at this time, a woman who knew about his past appeared. She was the original owner, Bai Xiaohua. Bai Xiaohua was a fan of Oh Jinma. Because of their relationship when they were young, she went to the fan meeting. That was the first thing he said. Big Tree, you've grown up. Oh Jinma, it was not easy for him to give himself such a tall and Western-sounding name, Big Tree. At that moment, the angel's gentle smile was about to crumble. Bai Xiaohua tried her best to get close to him. I like your songs very much. When you were young. At that moment, Oh Jinma wished he was dead. He must not let this village belle say that when he was a child, he stole fish from the fish pond naked. He had climbed up a tree to steal a bird's nest and sneaked into her kitchen to steal sweet potatoes. Moreover, Oh Dashu's name was extremely violent. It must not be leaked. He wanted to kill her on the spot. Even though Oh Jinma hated Bai Xiaohua so much at that moment, it was to the point of exploding. However, he had never killed anyone before. He was afraid that he would fail, so he didn't do it. He was afraid that Bai Xiaohua would reveal his tragic childhood. Therefore, he met with Bai Xiaohua alone. Xiaohua was excited. Big Tree you. Oh Jinma showed a disgusted expression. Don't call me that in the future. Also, don't tell anyone about us. I'm not Big Tree. I'm Oh Jinma. He loathed his ugly and inferior childhood. He hated it even more when he saw his childhood neighbor. Only then did Bai Xiaohua realize that she had met an old friend in a foreign land. Oh Jinma looked at her coldly. He was not an angel at all. What conditions do you have? I heard that you can write songs yourself. Do you want to enter the music industry? I'll let you debut. Chapter 1127. Bai Xiaohua didn't expect Jinma to be so cold. She was stunned. Jinma was afraid that she would ask for too much. He immediately said, "This opportunity is very rare for an outsider with no talent. If I take this opportunity, we won't have anything to do with each other in the future. We won't know each other even if we meet." Bai Xiaohua shook her head and said hesitantly, "I have a request. If you fulfill it, I will pretend that we don't know each other." Bai Xiaohua was also confused. She really liked that Jinma was threatening her. Jinma gritted his teeth and said, "Don't push your luck." Bai Xiaohua said, "I want you to date me for a month." Jinma didn't want to agree to this condition at all. But Bai Xiaohua wasn't a pushover either. She exposed it on Weibo that night. "I have a big brother tree." This sentence didn't have any meaning. Besides Jinma, no one would understand. So Jinma agreed to it. When they were dating, they wouldn't have any physical contact. They would only meet once a week and there wouldn't be any photos. When Wei Bai saw this, she felt that Bai Xiaohua was dating a ghost. Jinma treated dating like air. And the image of Bai Xiaohua as a scheming girl was fixed in Jinma's heart. Then, during this month, Bai Xiaohua did everything she could do. Because of Jinma, she came into contact with Jinma's half-sister, Jiang Rou. And Bai Xiaohua was considered to have some talent. She even wrote a very good song. This song was her stepping stone to enter the entertainment industry. But before it could be published, Jiang Rou stole the original manuscript. With this song, Jiang Rou went from being a mediocre singer who could only rely on Jinma's reputation to survive. She didn't have any representative songs. She completely exploded. The song was good, and Jiang Rou had a sweet voice. Most importantly, she was Jinma's younger sister. His sister actually knew how to write songs. This was simply a family of geniuses. That was why the news about the family of geniuses had been spreading like wildfire. As for Bai Xiaohua, she was unwilling to let her results be stolen. She exposed it on Weibo, but because the original manuscript was missing, she was scolded by Jiang Rou's fans to the point that she almost committed suicide. Later on, Jinma even called her and scolded her for being disgusting. Bai Xiaohua was so angry that she went to drink. When she got drunk, she actually revealed her relationship with Jinma to the public. But because the two of them really didn't have much interaction, there were no photos or anything. Jinma did not respond either. Bai Xiaohua was once again on the hot search list. And Jinma had completely stopped contacting her. Bai Xiaohua really liked Jinma, so she heard that he was going to the Shenghua Award ceremony. After racking her brains, Bai Xiaohua got a ticket and went in. In the end, in less than 10 minutes, she was recognized by Jinma and Jiang Rou's fans. Then, it was the scene when Wei Bai woke up. Jinma appeared again, and the annoyance in his eyes was obvious. "You're too much. I've never seen such a scheming woman who would do anything to become famous." After sorting out those memories, Wei Bai quickly adjusted her state of mind. She clutched her clothes tightly and looked at him with a haggard and pale face. There was vulnerability and fear in her eyes after being hurt. Jinma was indifferent and couldn't be bothered to look at her. "I'll pay your hospitalization fees. This is the last time." After saying that, he turned and left. It was as if he was afraid of getting into Wei Bai's bad luck. Chapter 1128. Wei Bai suddenly said in a hoarse voice, "Did you know that Jiang Rou stole my original work?" Jinma. This was the first time she had called him with such a cold voice. Jinma's footsteps paused and his voice turned cold. "How can you be so thick-skinned? How can someone as evil as you create good works?" Wei Bai finally could not hold back her sobs. Jinma, don't you know what kind of talent Jiang Rou has? If she was really talented, she would have been famous long ago. How could she only become famous after meeting me? Jinma turned his head, his eyes indifferent. "So what?" Wei Bai looked at him blankly, as if she could not understand his words. Oh, Jean Ma's angelic appearance finally had a hint of evil. Anyway, you're hated by everyone now. No one will believe anything you say. The village child in the quagmire should obediently go back to farming. Don't come out and make a fool of yourself. Bai Weiwei seemed to react. You let me be slandered, just to make me become a rat crossing the street. No one will believe me. Now, even if she said that she was Oh Jean Ma's neighbor, no one would believe her. Oh Jean Ma smiled coldly, turned his head, and returned to his gentle expression. He left without saying a word. Weiwei Bai's expression also changed after he left. Then she lowered her head and ate her porridge. Tongzi, this person is too hypocritical and shameless. I feel like I'm going to die from looking at him. The system said, me too. Oh right, your side reward is here. Weiwei Bai said, this is the first time you're so eager to give me a reward. What's wrong with you? The system found a one-time reward in the trash and happily sent it to Weiwei Bai. Ding, the host is rewarded with the animal transformation skill. Weiwei Bai, the system said, this skill allows you to transform into any animal. Do you want to try? When you're asleep, your soul can cross over into an animal's body. Weiwei Bai, thank you. Why did she turn into an animal? Should she turn into a wild boar and kill Oh Jinma? Suddenly, she had a flash of inspiration. Can this skill be used on others? Yes, but it can only be used on one person. Weiwei Bai's eyes lit up, and then she slowly revealed an evil smile. Oh Jinma returned to his own house, which was very luxurious. There were all kinds of expensive musical instruments, and the floor was covered with sheets of musical scores. There were also all kinds of gold ornaments that were not suitable but were very expensive. Oh Jinma thought about how he had finally gotten rid of that scheming woman, Weiwei Bai. He was in a great mood. He put down his guitar and began to write a song on the sheet of music. This song was very pleasing to the ears. He was talented, and even had a musical sensitivity that far surpassed others. But unlike what the outside world said, he didn't write music as if it was a game. To maintain his image as a peerless genius who could become a god even if he did not work hard. Basically, he lived a relaxed life during the day, and when he returned home, he would desperately write songs, learn songs, and practice his voice. He did it to get everything he had today. To get everyone's praise. He did it with all his might. That was why he hated Weiwei Bai so much. He was clearly so different from when he was young. No one knew about his childhood, but Weiwei Bai appeared. And now that Weiwei Bai's reputation was ruined, no one would believe her words. Oh Jinma could finally breathe a sigh of relief. He poured himself a glass of wine, shook it pretentiously, drank it, and smacked his lips. It did not taste good, but one bottle cost tens of thousands. It was not even as good as the soup base of the spicy hot pot. He was the little angel prince, so the food he ate had to be elegant. He even had a small character who liked to eat sweet things. This character had won over a large number of young fans. But in reality, he was a rough man who liked extremely spicy hot pot, stinky tofu, bean noodles, fried meat skewers, and the like. He especially hated sweet things. Oh Jinma took a relaxing shower and went to bed early. After dealing with Weiwei Bai, he was the elegant little angel again. After closing his eyes for a while, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Why was it so cold? Did he open the window? He immediately opened his eyes and realized that he was lying outside. It was so dark. Did he transmigrate? Suddenly, he felt that he seemed to have become shorter. He raised his hand and saw that his furry and sharp little claws were moving. Oh Jinma was so scared that he trembled, and the fur on his body stood up. He shouted loudly what was going on. But what came out was, meow. Oh Jinma was stunned. He did not expect that one day he would grow fur on his body. It was not the wings of an angel. It was cat fur? He turned into a cat? Oh Jinma was greatly shocked. He hugged his head with his two little claws and had a silly look on his face. He must not have woken up yet. He should continue sleeping. Oh Jinma curled up into a ball and trembled as he closed his eyes. But in the next second he suddenly flew into the air. Someone grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up. When he opened his eyes, he saw a familiar face appear. He immediately stiffened. It was Weiwei Bai. Wei Wei Bai looked at him and slowly revealed a witch-like smile. // Chapter 1129. Wei Wei Bai was shocked and reached out to grab him. Oh, Jin Ma swung his claws at her. His claws scratched the back of her hand. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and there were a few bloody scratches on the back of her hand. Oh, Jin Ma smirked and landed on all fours. He almost lost his balance. He staggered a few steps as if he was drunk. He was afraid of being caught by Wei Wei Bai and walked forward with his hands and feet. Kitten, come back. Wei Wei Bai suddenly shouted at him. Oh, Jin Ma looked at her arrogantly. Did she really think that he was a cat that would listen to everything she said? The strong headlights shone on Oh Jinma. Oh Jinma's eyes were dazzled and he jumped back. But it was too late. A sports car that was huge for Oh Jinma was heading towards him. He had just transmigrated into a cat. He thought that this was the most bizarre and tragic thing in the world. But he was wrong. The most tragic thing was that on the first day he transmigrated into a cat, he was crushed into a meat patty. At this critical moment, a figure jumped out from the side and scooped him up, hugging him into a warm embrace. Oh Jinma was stunned. His nose was filled with Wei Wei Bai's light and warm scent. Her heart was beating fast and her body was trembling. But she still hugged him tightly. The sports car sped past them. He didn't notice that a woman was hugging a cat. If Wei Wei Bai hadn't rushed out to hug him and shifted their position, Oh Jinma would have died. Oh Jinma retracted his claws and released them. He tilted his head and looked at Wei Wei Bai with a complicated expression. But he realized that she was squatting on the ground. Her face was pale and her breathing was heavy. She helplessly tugged at the corner of her mouth and revealed a bitter smile. Don't run around. There are traps and dangers everywhere. No one will save you. Oh Jinma narrowed her eyes, her mouth drooping. Her expression was blank for a moment. It was as if he felt that she was different from what he had imagined. Wei Wei Bai squatted for a while before she forced herself to get up. Oh Jinma realized that her legs were weak. Thinking back to when the car rushed over, he thought he was going to die. In reality, even if a person was killed by a car, no one would help. Not to mention that he was now a cat, who would be willing to take the risk to save him. He curled up in Wei Wei Bai's still warm embrace. His little cat paw rested on her arm and silently retracted his paw. Maybe Wei Wei Bai wasn't going to cook him. Was it because she actually liked cats? Oh Jinma would never admit that his opinion of her had changed. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -30. Wei Wei Bai walked to the roadside and picked up a shopping bag. Oh Jinma realized that he was in a garbage dump. And Wei Wei Bai only saw him when she came out to buy things. Wei Wei Bai carried the shopping bag, hugged the cat again, and walked into the nearest store. She asked if there was any cat food and some things that the cat needed. But there wasn't. Wei Wei Bai didn't have a trace of impatience. On the streets in the middle of the night, she hugged him and asked at least 3 stores. Finally, she asked the right place. Oh Jinma's expression changed from disdain to silence. She didn't need to care about him. But she walked to buy the things that the cat needed. Wei Wei Bai bought some pet supplies. Then she walked back to her rented house. It was already late at night. She opened the door. The rented house was very simple. But Wei Wei Bai decorated it very cleanly and warmly. On the wall, there was a poster. Oh Jinma took a look. Wasn't this his poster? Download, address. Chapter 1130. He felt disgusted at the thought that this woman was his fan. After doing so many shameless things, she still had the cheek to hang up his poster. Wei Wei Bai put him down and went to boil some water. Oh Jinma looked at the poster and tried to use some strength to jump up. He had never been so light before. Without much thought, he scratched the poster with his claws. He wanted to take the poster down, but his claws were not accurate and destroyed the poster. Seeing that there were a few more scratches on his handsome face, he unhappily used his soft cat paws to wash his face. Halfway through, he looked at his claws in shock. Would humans use their own hands to wash their face? No, only cats would. He had only turned into a cat for 1 or 2 hours, but he had already learned how to use his hands to wash his face. Oh Jinma was so frightened that he immediately put down his claws and sat down obediently. Although he was sitting, he couldn't help but look around. He saw that there was a photo frame at the head of the bed. It was actually a magazine photo of him that Wei Wei Bai had cut out and put in. Beside his photo was a photo of Wei Wei Bai smiling brightly. There was an obvious white gap in the middle. The style and color of the photo were different. Oh, Jinma snorted. How much did she like him? How could she do such a lowly thing? Oh, Jinma was not happy at all to be liked by a woman he hated. There was a rush of movement from the bathroom. Bai Weiwei came out and reached out to pick him up. Oh, Jinma looked stubborn and proud. His cold cat face and amber eyes looked at Weiwei Bai disdainfully. Weiwei Bai liked him. Although he hated her, he felt a sense of superiority when he saw her. People who were liked were always fearless, and cats who were liked were the same. Weiwei Bai put him next to the basin and said gently, "You've been wandering outside for too long. I'll give you a bath." Oh, Jinma turned his head away. He didn't know why, but his legs turned to jelly when he saw water. He suddenly saw himself in the mirror. It had a round pancake face and drooping mouth. Its hair was so messy that it looked like a ball of wool that had been in the garbage for 100 years. What was even more frightening was that he thought that a handsome soul like him could be considered to have transmigrated. Shouldn't it be a handsome cat? How could it be such a dirty, horrible, dull-faced, and ugly demented cat? Oh, Jinma was frightened by its reflection in the mirror and let out a meow. "Fuck, this isn't me." He quickly jumped into the water and used his cat paws to wash his face. He must be too dirty. He shouldn't be so ugly. He had never looked so ugly before. Weiwei Bai was splashed with water and couldn't help but laugh. "I've never seen a cat that likes bathing so much. You're so cute." Oh, Jinma looked at her with round eyes. Under the light, she had a happy smile on her face and her eyes were sparkling because of her smile. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -25. Oh, Jinma stared at her for a few seconds with a face full of water before turning around. Its cat face looked like it had nothing to live for. What was wrong with him? Why did he think that such an annoying woman was beautiful? After he became a cat, even his sense of beauty wasn't human anymore. Yes, in his eyes, such an annoying Weiwei Bai wasn't a human anymore. Weiwei Bai finished bathing him and quickly picked him up with a large towel. Oh, Jinma looked at himself in the mirror. Because his hair was wet, it was messy like needles exploding. He was even uglier. The download address is at https://www. Sashu. Chapter 1131. He transmigrated into an ugly cat. Life was hopeless, and the cat life was hopeless. Weiwei Bai wiped him clean and used a hairdryer to carefully dry him. She finally saw what the stray cat looked like. It was actually a blue-gray short-haired cat. It was so hungry that it was barely left with a round face. This skill could only allow Oh Jinma's soul to enter a cat nearby at random. Weiwei Bai had been looking for Oh Jinma for a long time. Weiwei Bai unwrapped the cat food for him. When Oh Jinma saw such a deranged thing, his whole cat group exploded. He crawled on all fours and jumped from her lap onto the blanket. Then he used his paws to pull the blanket over his head, revealing 2 orange eyes. He looked at Weiwei Bai in horror. Eat cat food. Was this something a human should eat? Even if he were to starve to death, he would definitely not eat a mouthful of cat food. Weiwei Bai smiled gently as if she was coaxing a child. Eat something, okay? Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep if you're hungry. Oh Jinma, meow. Get lost. Weiwei Bai patiently coaxed him. It's not good for your body if you don't eat. Oh Jinma snorted coldly and rolled away with his back facing Weiwei Bai. He would rather die than eat. Let him die. Weiwei Bai looked at this skinny, flat-faced cat. He was so arrogant. It was funny but cute at the same time. She felt that if she forced Oh Jinma to eat cat food from the start, he would definitely fall out with her. She could only go to the kitchen and cook some white meat for him without any seasoning. Then, she cut it into small pieces and put it in a bowl. She found a can of salmon in the fridge. Then she took out some and put it on a small plate. Then she fed it to Oh Jinma. Oh Jinma actually didn't want to eat, but his body didn't know how long he had been hungry. The cat food made him determined to go on a hunger strike. However, once he saw food that resembled humans, he couldn't help but lower his head to eat meat and fish. It actually tasted pretty good. Wait a minute, he ate with his mouth. Oh, Jinma looked at the half-eaten food in shock. He, a dignified human, had actually given up on the dignity of a human. He ate with his mouth. He stared blankly at the dried fish. Sadness surged in his eyes. The more he looked, the sadder he felt. The sadder he felt, the more he felt. Why does this dried fish look so delicious? Then, Mr. European Cat endured the humiliation and finished everything. After eating, he spread out his limbs and occupied Wei Wei Bai's bed, snoring comfortably. A warm and comfortable bed, a clean body, and a full stomach. Oh, Jinma started to feel sleepy as he savored the taste of the dried fish. Suddenly he saw Wei Wei Bai looking up at the wall. He suddenly thought of something and immediately turned his head to look. It was his poster. This woman, was she thinking about dirty things while looking at his poster in the middle of the night? Oh, Jinma's expression was cold and disdainful. That was all she could do. Anyway, she definitely wouldn't be able to get close to him in the future. She could only look at his poster and live the rest of her life in regret. Just as he was thinking about this, Wei Wei Bai stood up and nimbly pulled the poster off the wall. She was so nimble that there wasn't a trace of hesitation. Oh, Jinma stared at her with wide eyes, only to see her expressionlessly tearing the poster apart, crumpling it into a ball and stuffing it into the rubbish bin. Wei Wei Bai complained helplessly, "Sigh, there's too much rubbish. We have to take out the rubbish tomorrow morning." Rubbish? That was his poster. Wei Wei Bai looked around and flipped through some magazine photos of Oh Jinma. There were also some newspaper photos. They were all things that groupies would collect. Wei Wei Bai threw them away expressionlessly. Oh Jinma looked at her as if she was throwing rubbish. Not only did she not hesitate, but she also looked at him with disdain. She threw away a bunch of his things. Oh Jinma's heart twitched as he looked at her. Suddenly he saw a picture frame at the head of the bed. Bai Weiwei also caught a glimpse of it. A man and a cat looked at it silently. Just as Oh Jinma thought that Wei Wei Bai missed him and couldn't bear to throw it away. Wei Wei Bai frowned. How could I make such a lowly thing? It's disgusting. Oh Jinma's fur drooped. He didn't know why, but when he saw Wei Wei Bai throw his things at him, his mood soured. He didn't like it when she chased after him. Wei Wei Bai was very calm as she threw the picture frame into the rubbish bin. Then she turned off the lights, got on the bed and hugged Oh Jinma. Go to sleep. Her voice was muffled. Oh Jinma felt warm. His round face was pressed against her chest. Although it was comfortable, wasn't this taking advantage of her? He hesitated and wanted to push her away with his cat paws. But in the next second, the cat fur on his head suddenly became wet. He looked up in a daze and a few drops of water hit his forehead. He belatedly realized that it was Bai Weiwei crying. Her crying was suppressed and it made one's heart ache. Her body was also trembling because of the immense pain that she was suppressing. I won't do it again. Oh Jinma heard her cry softly. I won't like that scumbag anymore. Oh Jinma was dazed for a moment before he reacted. Was the scumbag she was talking about him? Oh Jinma suddenly reflected on himself. Did he go too far in making her shout at him? Ding, the male lead's favorability is -20. Chapter 1132. You can search for Transmigration System, Adonis, come to Sashu. In Baidu to find the. He did not know how he fell asleep, but after a night of strange things, he finally woke up. He stretched his limbs and suddenly felt that something was wrong. He opened his eyes and found that he was a human again. Oh Jinma jumped up in surprise and checked his body. He was really back. Was last night a dream? Oh Jinma thought about it, his hands unconsciously bent as he washed his face. After washing his face, Oh Jinma wanted to chop off his human paws. What was wrong with him? He had a dream and woke up as a cat. He quickly went to wash himself, but halfway through, he suddenly remembered how it felt to be bathed by Wei Wei Bai last night. Her hands were soft as she gently washed the dirty fur on his body. She was afraid that he would catch a cold, so she wrapped him in a towel. It was very warm and very comfortable. Oh Jinma quickly stopped his memories. It was just a stupid dream. What was he thinking about? He opened the fridge and wanted to eat breakfast, but when he saw a can of fish, he reached for it. When he started cooking the white meat, he realized that he was a human, not a cat. What was the point of eating this? But since it was already cooked, he could not waste it, so he ate it. The taste was very light, but it was delicious when he was a cat. Why was it not delicious when he was a human? Oh, Jinma silently warned himself that it was just a dream. Wei Wei Bai woke up and was face to face with a big-faced cat. The cat said, "Meow." Wei Wei Bai said, "Speak human language." Meow Me said, "Meow woo woo." The system said, "It said it was hungry." Wei Wei Bai said, Oh, Jinma is gone?" The system said, "His body is awake, so his soul will automatically return to his body. Then the cat will become the original cat." Wei Wei Bai said, "Can't this function make Oh Jinma a cat?" Bad review. The system was speechless. It was possible when it was first bought, but it broke down later on, so it could only be like this. The system silently looked at its pile of trash. They were all semi-defective goods. It silently tidied up its own garbage. Although it was semi-defective, it was still a poor ghost. They were all treasures that could be used to fool the host, who asked the host to only have it as a system, so it didn't have much experience. Without seeing good things, there was no way to compare. Thinking of the host forum, its host didn't have the authority to access it, it felt lucky. If he saw those hosts on the forum who were living a life of debauchery and were so happy that they could go to heaven, the host would definitely not want it. Wei Wei Bai went online and found that her Weibo was filled with all kinds of personal attacks. There were fans of Jiang Ro, but most of them were fans of the little angel, Oh Jinma. Oh Jinma's fans were unique in the entertainment industry because of Oh Jinma's persona. A bunch of retarded guardian angels formed the Retarded Alliance and doted on Oh Jinma like their own son. Every one of them felt that they were the messengers of justice. Their MO wouldn't scold people and wouldn't retaliate when hurt. So Oh Jinma's fan club was full of aggressive fans. For example, the previous time when the host sneaked into the audience of the award ceremony, she was spotted by Oh Jinma's fans. That was why the tragedy of the award ceremony happened. Wei Wei Bai browsed through the comments. Then she stared at the computer and pondered. Most of the comments were focused on how shameless she was for daring to use Oh Jinma's relationship to gain fame. Jiang Ro's plagiarism was less conspicuous because she didn't have many fans. Crossover system, Adonis, come over here. Chapter 1133. And the plagiarism of Jiang Ro was the fuse that made Oh Jinma fall out with her. He had always thought that the original owner was a scheming woman, but when the plagiarism incident came out, he immediately labeled Wei Wei Bai as a disgusting person. Wei Wei Bai felt that the reason why his favorability towards her increased so quickly last night was because when a person suffered a huge blow, they would instinctively rely on the person who gave them a sense of security. Oh Jinma must have suffered a huge blow when he turned into a cat last night. He almost died under the wheels of a car and was saved by her. That was why he felt less disgusted with her. But his impression of her was still as bad. Wei Wei Bai stared at the plagiarism comments and suddenly asked the system, "Is there anything that can make me sing or create awesome songs?" The system flipped through the products in the discount section. There's an old talent booster recently. Because it's old, it's been replaced in the discount section. You can buy 50 days of life. Wei Wei Bai was about to have a heart attack. 50 days? The system said, it's still on discount. If it's not on discount, we won't be able to afford it. Wei Wei Bai asked, is this thing useful? The system said, of course. It can make you light up 3 talents, and all of them can reach your body's limit. Wei Wei Bai pressed on her heart, use it, use it. Luckily, her current life points were in thousands. Otherwise, at the rate at which she earned 30 days' worth of HP in a single plane, killing her would not have cost her that much HP. Although the original owner had some talent. But this talent was poured into the song that Jiang Ro plagiarized. Some people could write such a good song in their lifetime. This was still considered a talented person. Unfortunately, the original owner only had this bit of talent. Her voice wasn't particularly good either. It couldn't even compare to Jiang Rou's voice. So Wei Wei Bai didn't have a choice. Singing and writing songs required a lot of practice, and it required a lot of talent to succeed. He had no choice but to use his savings. The system clicked by, and Wei Wei Bai received the talent booster. She did not hesitate to put her talents into singing and composing. When he lit up the compose button, the lyrics button also lit up. The system said, after your composing talent increases, the talent tool will give you a lyricist talent. Wei Wei Bai only had one skill left. She chose the pet skill. After all, she had to raise a cat. If she didn't have the ability to raise a pet, it was possible that she would raise the pet to death. She thought about how she had raised Jinma to death. The favorable impression points would probably shoot up into the atmosphere like a rocket. Negative favorable impression points would shake the heavens and earth. After Wei Wei Bai had chosen her talent, she felt that her talent in music composition was soaring. This feeling was very obvious. For example, when he heard a song, he could understand and analyze how many methods were used to produce the song. But when he was writing songs, the moment he raised his pen, it would be a golden song. This was simply too good. The 50 days were not wasted. Wei Wei Bai finally felt that her heart did not hurt so much. She went online to check and found that the recently hyped Huan Nation's Best Song competition was starting to audition. Huan Nation's Best Song competition, as the name suggested, was looking for original talents from all over the country. Everyone had to bring their own original songs to participate in the competition. Then, every round, they had to sing their own original songs. During the first season of this competition, it was very amazing in the early stages. It was also the viewership champion that year. But in the second half of the competition, it collapsed. Chapter 1134. That was because all songwriters knew that it was impossible for one person to write many good songs. And this program required all of them to be original works. It also required original songs for more than 10 rounds of competition. In the beginning, the songs that were taken out were the best written songs. Towards the end, the audience's appetite was whetted. But they found that the songs were getting worse and worse. Even on the champion's night, none of the songs were listenable. This caused the program to fail. And to recover ratings, the program team hyped up, polled in couples, exposed all kinds of dark secrets of the contestants, and used all kinds of tricks. They did whatever they wanted. This caused the program's reputation to collapse. Although they were scolding, the program still had ratings. Wei Wei Bai watched the recent talent shows launched by several programs. She still decided to go to this original composition competition, because the program director of this competition was shameless enough to do anything for ratings. But the director was very insistent on one thing: to eliminate any singers who were not original and plagiarized works. Even the contestants who bought the songs were immediately eliminated once they were found out. The director's bottom line was originality, and he had no bottom line other than originality. So she participated in this program as long as her works were all original. Then, even if Jiang Rou suppressed her, the director team would not eliminate her. Because she had enough topics, scolding brought ratings. This was also recognized by people in the industry. Wei Wei Bai submitted the registration form online. Seeing that there was still a week before the audition, she put it aside and continued to write songs. She had 50 life points. How could she earn back if she didn't write more? Wei Wei Bai went to feed the cat halfway through writing, and then she ate something to continue writing. The paper in the room was casually thrown on the ground. The talent booster didn't give her songs directly. Instead, she needed to fumble around and write them herself, and guaranteed that the songs she fumbled around would be especially good. This was considered to be talented. When the original owner wrote, she used a guitar. Generally, songwriters would have an instrument. She was afraid that writing a song with a pen would be too weird, so she took the guitar and found that she played well. The original owner had her own skills. The incomplete notes on the paper all over the floor gradually formed 2 or 3 particularly good songs. Wei Wei Bai found that the night was dark. She yawned, rubbed her eyes and went to cook. When he went to feed the cat, he found that the cat had changed. This change did not need Jinma to say anything. She could see it from the big cat's face. The cat that Oh Jinma possessed had an expression that said, "You bunch of stupid mortals don't deserve to live. Even if I'm a cat, I'm still a cold and noble little angel." To be honest, this expression was really asking for a beating. When Wei Wei Bai saw him, her lazy expression immediately turned into joy and doting. She was a cat lover, and she always kept in mind that she was a lively little animal. "Little tree, you are too skinny. I will get you some meat and fish. Eat some cat food too." Oh Jinma's face was sluggish. He turned his head, and his expression was hideous and twisted. He just drank a little and went home to sleep early. Why did it turn into a cat? This is impossible. This can't be real. Is this not a dream? No, he didn't believe it. His face was filled with despair. Suddenly, his cat head was rubbed by someone. He immediately covered his head with his paws and looked at Wei Wei Bai with a grimace. "Meow, don't touch me." Wei Wei Bai's smile became friendlier. "Little tree, it's time to eat." "Oh Jinma, little tree? What's with this lousy name?" He hated his first name the most. Big Tree, this lowly name, was simply a disgrace to him. Chapter 1135. This woman raised a cat and even called him by his childhood name. This was how much she liked him. Oh Xiaoshu's face was full of contempt. He faintly glanced at the plate, then coldly and arrogantly turned around, holding a cat's butt towards Bai Weiwei. He ate when she asked him to. He was really a cat. Suddenly, a hand gently scratched his chin. A wave of numbness and comfort made his whole body go limp as if he had been electrocuted. His limbs were numb and his eyes were red. He had never felt so comfortable before. Then he suddenly realized that he was lifted up. Wei Wei Bai smiled gently and said softly, "I'm not a bad person." She was afraid that he was a new cat and would be cautious, so he did not dare to eat. Oh Jinma looked at her with disdain. "Fine, I won't eat." Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and touched his belly slowly. Oh Jinma's eyes were wide open. How could there be such a comfortable thing in this world? His cat body approached Wei Wei Bai uncontrollably just to get closer to her. Wei Wei Bai smiled even more happily. Her fingers seemed to have magic. Wherever she touched, he would have an orgasm. How could he use such a vulgar adjective? This was a cat's instinct, not his. Oh Jinma suddenly realized that his mouth was stuffed with meat again. He smacked his mouth. It tasted very good. This was a delicacy that human taste buds could not understand. He was fed by Wei Wei Bai until he was full. Wei Wei Bai saw that he had finished eating and put him in the cat bed. "If you want to poop, remember to go to the cat litter box. Don't poop everywhere." Oh Jinma's comfortable expression suddenly darkened. Would he poop? He would rather die than poop. This was the dignity of a human who had turned into a cat. Wei Wei Bai's phone rang and she picked it up. "Is this the program team of Hua Country's Best Song?" "Yes, I'm Wei Wei Bai. I'm sure I want to register." The relaxed expression on Wei Wei Bai's face disappeared, replaced by a serious expression. She casually took the note and remembered. "All right, I'll prepare at least 10 original songs, okay? I only have 3 songs on hand right now. Can I send them by email first?" The other side seemed a little unhappy. Wei Wei Bai begged for a long time before sending the song out. Oh Jinma looked at her coldly. She was going to participate in an original song talent show. He knew about the show, and the production team had even invited him to be one of the judges for the 2nd season. The remuneration was very reasonable. Although he was very tempted, the level of this program was not high enough for him to participate. He gave up. After all, this was not in line with his image as a superstar angel. However, he knew that this program still had some integrity. After all, the director insisted on true originality. If someone without talent went up, they would probably be eliminated in the first round. No backing would be of any use. Wei Wei Bai also wanted to participate. Idiot, was she qualified? How would she know what singing and composing were? She was a woman from a small mountain village. Her knowledge was narrow. She probably wouldn't even recognize a staff. She still wanted to participate in such a strong program. What was the point of going up? She was looking for a scolding. Wei Wei Bai did not care about the disdainful expression of the big-faced cat beside her. She turned on the recording device on the computer indifferently. Then, she hugged the guitar and started singing softly. Her voice was not sweet, but it was very clear and very recognizable. The song was about a crush. A sweet and sour melody, neither heavy nor bitter, began to play softly and skillfully. Oh Jin Mo's body that was originally tilted suddenly sat up straight. He stared at her. This song, he had never heard of it before. Halfway through the song, Wei Wei Bai suddenly stopped. Then she took a pen and wrote something on the paper. Then she continued singing. Oh Jin Mo realized that he was surrounded by papers. He lowered his head to look. It was a familiar incomplete song that he dealt with every day. He stretched out his cat claws and looked at the papers one by one. This was an original song. And it was a very good song. Every song could be a hit. Oh Jin Mo suddenly felt like he was struck by lightning. He was stunned for a long time before he looked up at Wei Wei Bai in disbelief. Did she really have the talent to write songs? Chapter 1136. Wei Wei Bai sang an original song and sent it to the program crew. The program crew needed to confirm her singing ability. After she finished singing and sent it over, she realized that Big Face was looking down at the score she wrote. The cat's face was serious and his eyes were sharp. He looked at it and gritted his teeth as he used his claws to grab another piece of paper to continue reading. She heard him muttering, "Meow, meow, meow." "No, I don't believe it. It's all fake. This is a dream." Wei Wei Bai yawned. She had been thinking about the strategy for the past few days. Also, there were repercussions of a concussion. Her body was not very good and she could not stay up late. Actually, staying up late was worth it because Oh Jin Ma would definitely enter the cat's body at night many times. This was the best time to gain a good impression of her. Oh Jin Ma read to the end and had to admit that it was not plagiarism. He was a composer, so he was very clear about the process of a person writing a song. These songs were written by Wei Wei Bai. With this kind of talent, she should have been famous long ago. How could she be in such a miserable state? Was it because she was ugly? Oh Jin Ma looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai sitting lazily on the computer chair. She casually reached out to support her face and looked down at the score. A few strands of hair fell to the side of her face. Under the light, her fair face had a kind of softness that was worth looking at. This kind of softness was not offensive and it was easy to attract fans. It was easy to get both male and female fans. Wei Wei Bai seemed to feel his gaze. She turned her head and happened to meet his eyes. Oh Jin Ma was nervous and lowered his head guiltily. He could not help but use force with his claws and tore the paper under his claws. He stared blankly at the paper under his claws. It was full of incomplete songs. He remembered that when he was writing songs, he hated it when anyone touched his things. Even the slightest sound could make him angry and throw things. This was the result of long-term stress. There was even an assistant who accidentally stepped on a piece of paper that he threw on the floor and was fired. Because that piece of paper had a song written by him. Although he didn't want it, his temper was so bad that he fired him. He gave enough money, and the contract was strict enough. No one dared to spread rumors. They were afraid of the sky-high penalty for breaching the contract. That was why his little angel persona had never crumbled. So when he tore apart Wei Wei Bai's song, he instinctively trembled. Wei Wei wouldn't throw him downstairs, right? He knew all too well the irritable feeling of having a piece of music that he had written with all his might destroyed. Wei Wei Bai stood up from the chair. He immediately raised his head and looked at her warily. She walked over and glanced at the paper it had ruined. She picked it up, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it into the trash can. Oh Jin Ma was confused. The next moment, she picked him up and gently stroked his head. "Little tree, it's okay. It's just a piece of paper. I forgot to cut your nails. Are you feeling bad?" Oh Jin Ma looked at her nervously, unable to react in time. Wasn't she going to step on him? She was obviously a scheming B*teach, yet she still threatened him. How could she be so nice to a cat? Could it be that Wei Wei Bai was a cat lover? Wei Wei Bai placed him on the chair and then went to search for a nail clipper for pets. Her hands had a relaxing magic. Oh, Jinma didn't feel anything. She carefully cut off the excess parts of his cat claws. He couldn't help but scratch them. He wasn't used to having such short claws. Wei Wei Bai was extremely gentle. She gently held his cat claws with 2 fingers. Chapter 1137. Don't move, it's not done yet. She smiled, then lowered her head and continued to snip gently. He looked up and saw that her long hair had fallen down, revealing the snow-white skin at the back of her neck. Delicate and weak. A beauty that was completely different from that of a man. Oh, Jinma looked at it and wanted to lick it. Lick it? What? Did he turn into a cat? Did the pure and innocent image of an angel completely collapse into a wretched cat? Oh, Jinma's face darkened. Suddenly, he pulled his claws and snatched them from Wei Wei Bai's hands. He turned around and swung his tail at Wei Wei Bai's hands. Meow, meow, meow. Don't touch me, you scheming woman. Wei Wei Bai looked at him with his but facing her. She really didn't have any thoughts about a cat. When Oh Jinma scolded her angrily. If he had scolded her in his human form, she might have wanted to take revenge. But looking at a cat acting like a master cat, she actually felt that it was natural. After the system heard her thoughts, it couldn't help but say, "You're about to become a cat slave." Keeping a dog was a friend of humans. Keeping a cat was a master cat. That was why people who liked to keep cats were called cat slaves. Wei Wei Bai rejected such an unpleasant name. I'm doing this for the strategy. A gentle strategy was so good. She had a year to slowly work on it. What was even better was that she didn't have any deep grudges with Oh Jinma in this world. After all, threatening Oh Jinma only made him lose his self-esteem. Compared to the other targets who were always venting their hatred for their country, this was already considered too light. Wei Wei Bai yawned again. She felt that she couldn't continue with the strategy. She needed to sleep. She placed Oh Jinma in the cat bed, then patted his head and said softly, "I'm going to sleep. You should sleep too. Xiao Shu, good night." Oh Jinma used his claws to push her hand away, refusing to communicate with her. Although he had turned into a cat, Wei Wei Bai was still good to him. However, Oh Jinma still resisted the woman who had threatened him. Wei Wei Bai didn't mind. There was still a long way to go. Love would come out sooner or later. Oh Jinma watched as Wei Wei Bai lay down on the bed. The room was small. When she lay down, her long hair spread all over the pillow, and it glistened under the light. Against her peaceful sleeping face, she looked exceptionally pure and beautiful. It was a face that had no offensive power, but was very beautiful. It was the kind of appearance that girls loved the most, but also the kind of beauty that men loved the most for their first love. Oh Jinma looked at the screen and suddenly slapped his eyes with his cat paw. Why was he studying her appearance? Did he want to be her manager? Seeing that Wei Wei Bai was in deep sleep, he sneakily jumped onto the papers again. The more he looked at them, the more shocked he was. These pieces of music were very good. He even felt jealous when he saw this. He was still short of a few songs for his next album and had been stuck on writing them. Because of his genius persona, even if he couldn't write them, he couldn't say them out loud. Seeing that the album was getting closer and closer, he became more anxious. However, the songs written by Wei Wei Bai were full of spirit. He suddenly stretched out his claws and hugged the papers, his cat face cold. Meow, idiot, such good songs should be locked up immediately after writing them and then applying for copyright protection. How could you throw them around so casually? Even if there was only one cat beside you, you couldn't let your guard down because cats could be transmigrated. Oh Jinma snorted coldly as he used his claws to carefully help her keep the papers. She suddenly breathed heavily and turned over. The blanket slid to the floor. Is at https://www.sashu.com/. Chapter 1138. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, come to Sashu. In Baidu to find the. Luckily, Wei Wei Bai's smell was soft and nice. He narrowed his eyes and the thought of running away in his mind became fainter and fainter. Suddenly, a hand gently stroked his head. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be sleepwalking as she closed her eyes and muttered, Good night. Oh Jinma's fur stiffened before he slowly relaxed his body and impatiently hummed, Meow, got it, woman. Ding, the male lead's affection is at -15. Oh Jinma opened his eyes as the morning sun shined in through the window. His face was dark and his body was stiff for a long time before he suddenly jumped up from the bed. He immediately rushed to the piano room and turned on the piano as he began to think about the scores he saw last night. His memory was very good and he had already written more than half of the 3 songs. He played the piano and hummed. His voice was like the sound of nature and it was especially stunning when paired with the high quality of the song. Because Wei Wei Bai didn't have lyrics, he could only hum. After he finished singing, his body was cold as he sat by the piano in a daze. He tightly gripped the paper as he looked at the score. It wasn't a dream. He could clearly feel that it wasn't a dream. He really did become Wei Wei Bai's cat. He knew that it was impossible to write these songs in a dream. Even if he dreamt of it at night, the songs he dreamt of wouldn't be like this. Because the style was completely different from his. Oh Jinma heard the sound of the door opening and then a sweet voice sounded. Brother, are you awake? Before Oh Jinma could react, the door to the piano room opened. A beautiful woman wearing jeans and a white shirt walked in with soy milk and youtiao in her hand. Jiang Ro said, Brother, you're so inspired this early in the morning. What song did you write? Oh Jinma's talent in composing and writing songs was first class. But because the style was too elegant and difficult, she couldn't find any of the songs. Oh Jinma was the kind of person who was so proud of his work that he was obsessed with cleanliness. She couldn't sing the flavor of his work. He would not have written songs for her. This was also the reason why Jiang Ro didn't have any representative works and couldn't become popular. Of course, this was before she stole Wei Wei Bai's songs. Oh Jinma looked unhappy for a moment. He hated it when people entered his piano room when he was composing. However, when he saw that it was his younger sister, he suppressed his displeasure and revealed a sincere smile. Xiao Ro, you woke up early today. She always slept until the afternoon. Jiang Ro pouted. I was just wondering if you hadn't eaten breakfast again. Her sharp eyes caught sight of the score in his hand. She reached out and snatched it, immediately flipping through it. Is that a new song? She said, humming at once in surprise. Brother, have you changed your style? It's so gentle and nice. It's not suitable for you to sing. Is it for me? Oh Jinma's expression changed when he saw her taking it. He immediately reached out and snatched it back. Then, he said in a low voice, It's not for you. Jiang Ro's smile froze. Her new song was a hit. Her fans were all eagerly waiting for her next song. Because everyone believed that she was Oh Jinma's younger sister, she was able to write such a good song just like her brother, genius. Moreover, because she was involved in the plagiarism scandal, her internet water army and fans had settled the matter very well. Furthermore, they had poured dirty water on Wei Wei Bai, making it impossible for her to make a comeback. However, she still needed her next song to be a hit to establish her position as the little diva. She had to continue to stay in this position, because only then would Oh Jinma have a way out when he found out that she wasn't his biological sister. Jiang Ro said shamelessly, Brother, my singing skills have improved by another level recently. Just give me a song. Oh Jinma was already squeezing the paper in his hand tightly. He said perfunctorily, I'll give you one next time when I write a song. Jiang Ro looked at the paper in his hand. Oh Jinma placed the score in the box beside the piano. Okay, let's eat breakfast. This was Wei Wei Bai's song, and it was going to be a song in the competition. No matter how much he hated her, he wouldn't let anything happen to her song. Jiang Ro looked at the song unwillingly. She had just hummed a part, and it was too suitable for her style. Oh Jinma ate his soy milk and fried dough sticks absent-mindedly, thinking about the white meat dried fish. After he finished eating, he suddenly thought of something and called his manager. I accepted the request from the judge of the good song. After Oh Jinma finished the call, he held his head in despair. What did he do? Just to find out how many good songs Wei Wei Bai could write, he actually accepted an invitation that he shouldn't have accepted. Jiang Ro sneaked into Oh Jinma's piano room when he was on the phone and saw the score in the box. She hesitated for a moment before she secretly took the song at the top. It was just a song, so Jinma definitely wouldn't blame her. He doted on her so much. com//crossover system, Adonis. Come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Com crossover system, Adonis. Come here, crossover system, Adonis. Come here, comma. Chapter 1141. She suddenly lowered her head and revealed a cute smile. She sang to the cat at her feet, "You act coquettishly with me, you don't like canned food, you like dried fish." The cat at her feet was very cooperative. Meow, meow, meow. Jinma's murderous eyes fell on the cat. He clearly didn't transmigrate, so why was the damn cat so cooperative? And don't lie, the dried fish he liked to eat was canned food. He liked to eat canned food. Jinma was about to suffer internal injuries. How could you distort the truth for the sake of blindly writing lyrics? The system was also about to suffer internal injuries. It controlled the cat and bitterly sang with the host. Wei Wei Bai finished singing, but the last line was still, meow. Jinma's eyes turned into knives. He couldn't wait to chop Wei Wei Bai to death. He clearly didn't care about her when he transmigrated into a cat. How could she have the face to write such a shameless line? What about him acting coquettishly? What about him kissing her? Those were all fabricated. What about him touching her hand with his tail and covering her with a blanket? He really covered her. Scheming woman, pretending to be asleep. The cup in his hand was about to shatter. Wei Wei Bai finished singing. She smiled and said, "I've finished singing, judges." One of the judges felt that the song was very well written. He immediately asked, "Where did your inspiration for this song come from?" Wei Wei Bai hugged her guitar and looked at the cat at her feet with a very gentle gaze. "I once met a scumbag. I used everything I had to like him. Later, I found that he was hypocritical and vain. Although he had a little bit of talent, his nature was extremely bad. He was simply a scumbag of the highest quality and a scheming man." Jinma. Was this an allusion to him? It must be. Wei Wei Bai bent down and picked up the big-faced cat. She gently patted it and suddenly smiled. She was originally beautiful, but because of her gloomy personality, she didn't attract much attention. Now that she was truly happy, the gloominess in her eyes had completely faded away. She had lost the haze of unhappiness, and there was only a clear and beautiful light. Jinma tightened his grip on the blanket until his fingernails turned white. He couldn't help but be attracted by her smile. Wei Wei Bai said gently, "At that time, I was completely disheartened, but I met it. It was thrown into the garbage dump by someone, and like me, no one wanted it." Jinma saw the cat in her hand. At that time, he had just woken up and realized that he had turned into a cat. He almost broke down. Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai was not at all gloomy after being abandoned, nor was she gloomy because of being scolded. "So to me, it is my family. Two homeless people becoming one family is the happiest thing for me." Jinma held his breath. His gaze wavered. He didn't expect Wei Wei Bai to treat this cat as family. The impression he had of Wei Wei Bai in the past. Suddenly, he was on the verge of collapsing. Ding, the male lead's affection is at -15. So I wrote this cat song for it. After listening to Wei Wei Bai explain her inspiration, the other two judges nodded. They felt that she had the ability to enter the competition. But Jinma didn't smile. He just looked at Wei Wei Bai with a cold expression. He suddenly said, "If I say that you can enter the competition and put the cat in a better family, would you be willing?" Enter the competition. The other two judges looked at Jinma in shock. Was this an unspoken rule? Wei Wei Bai hugged the cat. Her face showed a rare trace of confusion. Then slowly, her eyelashes trembled and her eyes lit up. //. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time, if you like. Chapter 1142. Even her face started to turn red. Her eyebrows were raised in anger. She stared coldly at Jinma. Would you send your family away in exchange for a chance to succeed? Jinma was embarrassed by her stare. He was just testing her, but he didn't expect Wei Wei Bai to be so angry. Wei Wei Bai laughed coldly. I'm so blind. Why would I like you? She curled her tongue around the last few words and stopped abruptly. Then she suppressed her anger and said, forget it. If the judges are all people of your standard, I'd better not participate. With that said, she hugged her guitar and cat and turned to leave. She didn't want to miss the opportunity to be on TV. Jinma's face was tense. His eyes were dark and scary. His handsome face didn't have a trace of pretending to be innocent and gentle. Instead, it was sharp and aggressive. He didn't know why he was so angry. She was the one who threatened him. She had only herself to blame for ending up in this state. Why was she looking at him with contempt? Jinma sensed the gazes around him and his expression changed instinctively. His expression became gentle and his smile was like a spring breeze. Then we'll stop the primaries for now. Everyone go and eat. Thank you for your hard work. Then he asked his manager and assistant to distribute drinks and shopping vouchers to each of the staff. The two judges were also taken care of. Suddenly, everyone was harmonious and harmonious. Behind Jinma's smile was an indifferent bystander. It was always like this. Even if he suddenly had a small accident, he only needed a small favor. There was absolutely no problem with his reputation. Jinma took advantage of the break and walked out quickly. When he turned the corner, he saw Wei Wei Bai sitting on a chair in the corridor with her guitar bag beside her. She was squatting and feeding cat food to the cat. She lowered her head and revealed the beautiful lines of her neck. Her long hair was tied up and the accessories were very simple. Her face was also lightly made up. Her entire body was light and clean. In the beginning, when she came out of the mountain village, she still smelled like dirt. Now it was the same as before. Her clothes were cheap. However, there didn't seem to be anything unnecessary. Jinma recalled that when he was young, he did not have a deep impression of Wei Wei Bai. But those days were very difficult because they were living under someone else's roof. When he was very young, he was thrown into the countryside. His mother was a mistress and thought that by giving birth to him, she could hook up with his father, who was a musical genius. In the end, his father refused to acknowledge him for the sake of his reputation. His mistress's mother found him an eyesore, so she threw him to the countryside. His monthly allowance of a few hundred yuan was also deducted by that family, leaving him with very little. He pretended to be cute and well-behaved just to get more food. A particularly painful period of time. Later on, when she was finally recognized, she realized that if she wanted to live a good life, she had to continue pretending to be cute and obedient. The more he pretended, the more he panicked. Later on, it became his persona, and he realized that he could get everything he wanted. He didn't even dare to imagine how he could live without this mask. So when Wei Wei Bai appeared and tried to break his mask, his reaction was so big. Jinma suddenly heard Wei Wei Bai whisper to the cat, "You're really picky. You eat dried fish and white meat at night, but you like cat food during the day. You're going to make me poor." Her voice was soft and gentle. Jinma leaned against the corner of the wall and listened indifferently, but there was a trace of throbbing in his eyes. You'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf, if you like. Chapter 1143. He was here during the day. If it wasn't his cat, of course it would be stupid enough to only eat cat food. Jinma was a little annoyed when he heard a message notification from his phone. He was afraid that Wei Wei Bai would hear it, so he immediately took it out of his pocket and wanted to mute it. Even he didn't know why he had to stay in the corner and watch Wei Wei Bai feed the cat. When he was muting his phone, he accidentally entered Weibo. There were a bunch of fans saying that they loved him on Weibo. He couldn't help but take a few glances, only to find that one comment had been pushed to the top. Let Jinma focus on writing songs. We, the angels, have to protect him and not let him be hurt by shameless women. Oh, Jinma thought of something and frowned. He finally remembered that Wei Wei Bai was still being attacked by his fans. The plagiarism incident and the relationship incident had pushed her into the center of the storm. Oh, Jinma pondered for a moment and thought of the songs written by Wei Wei Bai. His doubts finally surfaced. Jiang Ro's song, was it really written by her? Oh, Jinma sent a private message to Jiang Ro's Weibo. Send me the original draft of your popular song. I want to see how you compose and what songs you have written recently. I want to see if you have improved. After sending the message, Oh Jinma logged out and saw that Jiang Ro's latest Weibo post was that she was going to release a new song. Oh Jinma didn't think much of it and stuffed his phone into his pocket. Then he realized what he had done. Wasn't he suspecting that his sister had plagiarized? Oh Jinma frowned and his breathing became heavier. But songwriters wouldn't lie. Wei Wei Bai had such talent. Why would she slander others for a song that she was sure she could write? Oh Jinma, who was deep in thought, suddenly heard the sound of a cat. He lowered his head and saw a big cat face. The corner of his mouth twitched. Ugly cat. He really wanted to kick it away. Suddenly he realized something. Where was Wei Wei Bai? He glanced at the corridor and saw that the guitar was still there. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have gone to the bathroom. Oh Jinma started to feel nervous. His breathing became heavier and his heart started to beat faster. He felt that since he had transmigrated into this cat twice, he might transmigrate into it a third time. This cat was his other body. If he didn't keep watch, he wouldn't be able to rest assured. Who knew if this ugly cat would be stupid enough to crash into a car the next time it transmigrated? Oh Jinma bent down and revealed an angelic smile. He stretched out his hand and said, "Little ugly freak, come. Big brother will take you to eat something delicious." No matter what, this was such an important cat. He had to feed himself. As for Bai Wei Wei, he bought her the most expensive cat and returned it to her. The big-faced cat looked at him stupidly. Suddenly, it swiped its paw and made 3 bloody marks on the back of his hand. Oh Jinma's fingers trembled in pain. He gritted his teeth and said fiercely, "Do you know who I am? You are me and I am you. How can we hit each other when we are on the same side?" After saying that, Oh Jinma angrily pinched the big-faced cat's cheeks. "Follow me and you will live a good life. It's better than suffering. Don't be so ungrateful." The big-faced cat howled and scratched with its paw. Oh Jinma's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He grabbed the back of the cat's neck and laughed sinisterly. "You think I can't kill you? With your little cat body, you dare to fight with me? Struggle, no matter how hard you struggle, no one will save you." Cat, meow meow meow. Oh Jinma, ugly freak with no ambition. You need to be more domineering. Meow cat, meow meow. Oh Jinma was angry. "It's meow. Meow meow. Meow." The big-faced cat suddenly looked pitiful. Meow meow. Oh Jinma finally nodded. Yes, meow is the domineering one. Then he suddenly felt a chill. He turned around and saw Wei Wei Bai carrying a guitar bag and looking at him blankly. Oh Jinma, Wei Wei Bai looked at the cat in his hand. Then she looked at him. Oh Jinma suddenly thought of the stupid thing he had just done. Teach a cat how to meow? His lips trembled. Listen to my explanation. Anxious, he couldn't control his mouth. Meow meow, Wei Wei Bai trembled and looked at him in disbelief. What are you going to do to my cat? Then she suddenly rushed over and snatched the cat away from his hand. She protected it tightly and looked at him as if he was a pervert. Oh Jinma's lips and hands trembled. Listen to my explanation. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back and looked at him warily. Then she suddenly turned around and ran. Oh Jinma felt that the way Wei Wei looked at him just now was like looking at a psychopath. That must be it. Oh Jinma choked on a mouthful of blood. He really wanted to die. What kind of stupid thing did he do? Don't go and listen to his explanation. Chapter 1145. In the end, those fans who wanted to switch over were now his loyal fans. He believed that he was the best at brainwashing fans in the entertainment industry. His fans loved him. Oh, Jean Ma lifted the corners of his mouth and revealed a beautiful brainwashing smile. His amber eyes were filled with a warm smile, and even his hair was as beautiful as if it was dyed with light. Wei Wei Bai, I think you have some misunderstandings about me. I want to explain it to you. Wei Wei Bai finally raised her head and looked at his smile expressionlessly. It was as if she was looking at the McDonald's delivery man. Oh, Jean Ma felt that his smile wasn't working. He softened his attitude. I only found out recently that you were being bullied online. It's all my fault. I didn't restrain my fans and caused you trouble. Wei Wei Bai didn't look at the road anymore. Instead, she looked at him indifferently as if she was looking at a stranger. Oh, Jean Ma felt that he couldn't smile under her cold gaze. He coughed lightly to hide his awkwardness. I will restrain my fans. That was touching enough. It was time to get in the car. Wei Wei Bai sized up the car and suddenly asked, You want to send me back? Oh, Jean Ma breathed a sigh of relief. She finally softened. In fact, looking at Bai Weiwei's songwriting talent, as well as her character of loving cats, his dislike for her was not as strong. Wei Wei Bai walked forward and opened the back door. She got in and said coldly, Then drive. Oh, Jean Ma immediately started driving. Wait, why did he feel like he was the chauffeur? Oh, Jean Ma couldn't help but look at the rearview mirror as he drove. The big-faced cat was meowing at Wei Wei Bai in a friendly manner. Its ugly face was rubbing against her palm. Wei Wei Bai's cold expression slowly softened. She looked at it as if she was looking at a child. Then she took out some jerky from her pocket and fed it. She really liked cats. Oh, Jean Ma's fingers curled nervously. He was at a loss as to why he had chased after her and insisted on giving her a ride home. He seemed to be here to redeem his image. Oh, Jean Ma pursed his lips and said carefully, Your song is not bad. The song Cat was indeed written in a fresh and unconventional way. It was full of pure and sweet childlike innocence. Most importantly, it sounded good. In this era, the only criterion for a song was whether it was good or not. Whether a song was popular or not was related to how good the song was. Wei Wei Bai hugged her cat tightly and looked up. There was a trace of repulsion in her eyes. What do you want? Oh, Jean Ma. He just wanted to chat. What else could he do? Was he going to molest her? Oh, Jean Ma smiled. I was actually teaching your cat how to sing. It's amazing that your cat can sing. Yes, that was the reason. After saying that, he heaved a sigh of relief. He was teaching her cat how to sing, not how to meow. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment before saying seriously, Oh, Jean Ma, you don't have to do this. No one will believe anything I say in the future, so you don't have to seal my mouth. Oh, Jean Ma almost couldn't breathe. Honey's eyes were as cold as topaz. His smile disappeared. What do you mean? Wei Wei Bai, I won't talk about how we used to be neighbors. I'll definitely pretend that I don't know you in the future, and she took a deep breath and sadness flashed across her eyes. Her voice was calm but firm. I won't like you anymore. Oh, Jean Ma's fingers were on the steering wheel. His thin lips were pursed. His face was gentle and pure. At this moment, there was a trace of coldness and viciousness in the shadows. Chapter 1146. At this moment, there was a trace of coldness in the shadows. Oh, she doesn't like me anymore. He repeated softly to himself. He even recalled how he had thought that Wei Wei Bai was fanatically in love with him just a moment ago. This sentence was a slap to his face and even made him feel a little embarrassed. Wei Wei Bai hugged the cat and stared blankly at him for a few seconds. Then she turned her face away and said softly, You're a big star now. I'm just a street rat that everyone hates. I don't even have enough for next month's living expenses. You can rest assured. Oh, Jean Ma was about to break the steering wheel. Of course I can rest assured. No one will believe your words. If you want to debut now, you can only beg me. He was the judge of this competition. And he had a lot of power. If he didn't accept her, the director would give him face. It was impossible that Wei Wei Bai didn't know. He suddenly realized what he had done. His pupils constricted. He had actually revealed his most selfish and dark side. Wasn't this a threat? Oh Jinmo immediately glanced at the rearview mirror. He saw that Wei Wei Bai's face was slightly pale and her eyes were as dark as the night sky. She hugged the cat and lowered her head in loneliness without saying a word. Oh Jinma's chest tightened for a moment. He gritted his teeth and stepped on the accelerator without saying a word. Then with a turn, they entered the slum area of the cheap rental house where Bai Weiwei lived. It was late at night. He casually took a baseball cap from the front of the car and put it on to cover his gloomy eyes. Then he got out of the car and opened the back door. Weiwei Bai looked at him in shock. Oh Jinma leaned against the car door. His fingers gripped the door so tightly that they turned white. He pulled at his collar impatiently and said, "We're here. You can go back now." Wei Wei Bai looked outside and nodded. She opened the other door and got out of the car. Oh Jinma, who opened the door for a rare gentleman. Then he slammed the door shut and leaned against the car with a gloomy face. His slender body cast a long shadow on the ground. Wei Wei Bai carried the guitar and carried the cat forward. After a few steps, her frail figure began to tremble. Oh Jinma had been watching from the sidelines, but when he saw her like this, he immediately stood up straight. He was just about to ask what was wrong. However, Wei Wei Bai rushed forward as if she was going to rush through the door. Oh Jinma saw that she was walking briskly and knew that nothing had happened to her. He immediately snorted gloomily. Did he think he was a wolf? She ran so fast, afraid that he would eat her up. Suddenly, Bai Weiwei's footsteps stopped. She had just stopped under the streetlight. Her back was to him, and her voice sounded a little fragile in the night. "Oh Jinma, I'm sorry." Oh Jinma looked up. His expression was tense, and his handsome face was not as gentle as usual. There was only a bottomless evil aura. His tone was not very pleasant. "But, are you begging for mercy? Do you want me to let you go on TV? Otherwise, why would she apologize for no reason?" Bai Weiwei was silent. Her slender and thin back seemed somewhat lonely and elongated. There was a silent pressure that made Oh Jinma feel very uncomfortable. Perhaps he had pretended to be an angel for too long. When he saw Wei Wei Bai, who knew his true colors, he wondered if he wanted to vent his stress. He actually threw all his bad temper at her. Oh Jinma suddenly reflected on himself. He felt that he had caught her and bullied her. Did he know that she could not resist? He curved his lips coldly, and his gaze was even a little cold. He was really evil. Chapter 1147. Suddenly, he heard Wei Wei Bai's slightly hoarse and cold voice. "Oh Jinma, at that time I just came from the countryside. Other than bringing 2 sets of clothes and a month's worth of living expenses, I only brought your poster and walked into the city without any hesitation." Oh Jinmo raised his chin. His fair and delicate face looked confused for a moment. He didn't seem to understand what she was saying. Wei Wei Bai turned her head. Her bright black eyes were a little moist. She smiled, and the moist tears became as clear and beautiful as the Milky Way. "At that time I really liked you. I felt that my neighbor, Oh Dashu, was really amazing. He had become such a good singer." Oh Jinma's throat moved uncontrollably. He leaned against the car door tightly, not knowing what to say. Wei Wei Bai smiled helplessly. "The first time I joined your fan club, the first time I was hungry and waited in the cold for your autograph session. I waited for an entire day. I was stupid at that time. I didn't know that you also hated poor old neighbors." As she spoke, her smile disappeared and her voice lowered. "I just wanted to see you. At that time, you could have just cheered me on." Oh Jinma's mind was a little heavy. He stared blankly at the corner of her moist eyes. She forced a smile. "But you hated me so much. That's why I was so angry and said that I wanted to date you." Oh Jinma looked at her and smiled as if he was about to cry. His fingers clenched so tightly that the ring on his hand hurt. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back and walked away from the light into the shadows. As if retreating after the curtain fell, she smiled in relief before leaving. "Oh Jinma, I'm sorry. At that time, I was childish and annoying. I shouldn't have liked you and caused you trouble." The corners of her eyes lifted slightly. Her black eyes were as clear as water. There was no trace of greed towards him. Instead, because of her smile, It seemed gentle and warm. Half of Oh Jinma's body was hidden in the darkness, and his light-colored eyes had an obscure light. He suddenly pursed his lips and sneered, "You only know how to apologize now. What were you doing earlier? Do you think I'll forgive you just because you apologize?" He didn't know why, but he just felt aggrieved. It was as if Wei Weibai could not forget him and was a threat to him. He felt refreshed. She was so magnanimous, so why did he feel so stifled? The cat in Wei Weibai's hand meowed uneasily. She immediately lowered her head and gently stroked him. Her attention was no longer on Oh Jinma. Wei Weibai seemed relaxed and natural because she had let go of something. The beauty of a young girl was blooming on her face. Whether I like you or not has nothing to do with you. Whether you forgive me or not has nothing to do with me anymore. Wei Weibai turned around and left. My cat is hungry, so I won't entertain you. Goodbye. Oh Jinma stared at her back as she ran away. Cats were more important than him. Why didn't she ask if he was hungry? He should at least give her a ride, right? Oh Jinma returned to the car with a stomach full of anger. Suddenly, he slammed the steering wheel and spat out a few vulgarities. His breathing was messy and heavy. His mind was in a mess. Oh Jinma leaned against the back of the seat. He wanted to calm down, but he found that his mind was firmly occupied by a scene. It was when Wei Weibai smiled at him just now. He didn't even dare to admit that this country bumpkin from the countryside smiled more like an angel than he did. And it was especially good-looking. It was much better looking than his forced smile. Ding, the male lead's favorability is -5. Is at https://www.sashu.com/. Chapter 1148. Now that it was inappropriate to dress up, Bai Weiwei, who was used to seeing big scenes, acted as if nothing had happened. She reached out and brushed aside her hair, then stretched out her slender arm, her fingers holding a rubber band, and tied up her long hair. Her black hair was tied up. Her seductive and beautiful body was exposed in front of Oh Jinma without any concealment. Oh Jinma's paws could not cover the cat's eyes. He looked at her in a daze. His heartbeat quickened, his body heated up, and his eyes were dark and scary. He found it difficult to breathe and couldn't control himself. He opened his mouth and howled loudly. After howling, Oh Jinma suddenly froze. This howl was no different from a cat in heat. Wei Weibai was pouring warm water for him when she heard his howl. She couldn't help but laugh and say, "Little tree, you're in heat." Oh Jinma quickly retorted, "Ah wow, ah wow, ah wow, ah wow. You're the one in heat. Who would be in heat with you?" Who knew that his howl was not only lewd, but it also sounded like a cat's. Oh Jinma was shocked. What was wrong with his howl? What was with the burning fire in his body? Could it be that this damned cat was in heat? Wei Weibai reached out and patted his head. Oh Jinma was furious. Wherever her fingers touched, it was as if she was setting his body on fire. That numbing feeling was more than 10 times stronger. It made him tremble uncontrollably. He slapped her hand away with his paws. "Oh, get lost." It was clearly a scolding, but why was his voice so soft? Suddenly, a high-pitched howl came from outside the window. Oh Jinma froze and looked out the window in disbelief. What was that sound? Then, another howl came from not far away. This was the sound of a female cat in heat. It seemed like his howl when he was in heat had attracted many female cats. The female cats began to cry out one after another, forming a horrifyingly horny chorus outside the window. Wei Weibai smiled lovingly. "My little tree has grown up. Look at how popular you are. All the female cats outside like you." Oh Jinma was scared out of his wits. "Like my ass." He thought of the scene of a female cat pouncing on him. Oh Jinma was trembling. He hurriedly grabbed Bai Weiwei's hand and glared fiercely at her with big amber eyes. "Awoo, don't touch it anymore. Damn woman, you're playing with fire." Wei Weibai looked at him as if nothing had happened. Her smile deepened. Her fingers seemed to have accidentally touched the hair on his back, and then below, Oh Jinma howled, and the whole group of cats crawled out of the basin. Then they staggered towards the door. But before he could even take 3 steps forward, A pair of arms hugged him, and a voice filled with cold laughter. Run, struggle, no one will come to save you even if you scream yourself hoarse. Oh Jinma's limbs were stiff as he was carried into Bai Weiwei's unclothed embrace. Her fragrance was even stronger. His cat hair stood on end. Weiwei Bai thought he was afraid and immediately laughed. Then she reached out and patted his head to comfort him. All right, I'm just kidding. I know you don't like bathing. After speaking, she used a large towel to wipe his body clean. Then she wrapped a large towel around herself, walked out and placed the cat on a chair. Then she turned her back to him and started to wear her clothes. Her fair and delicate back was flawless. Her seductive backlines were prettier than any other female celebrity he had ever seen. Oh Jinma was wrapped in a large towel, and only his sneaky eyes could be seen. He turned his eyes away, but he couldn't help but sneak a peek. Chapter 1149. Weiwei Bai suddenly turned around. Her cheeks were flushed from the shower, and her long ponytail swept across her neck. It was as fresh and tender as a rose that had just bloomed. Oh Jinma's cat face was embarrassed. He immediately lowered his head and scratched the chair with his cat paws, pretending that he had not peeked. Weiwei Bai put on her pajamas, then hugged the cat and took the hairdryer. She turned on the slowest wind speed and slowly blew for him. Oh Jinma was originally still nervous, but when she held him in her arms, he let her slowly and gently rub his hair to dry him. That kind of comfortable feeling made him want to close his eyes and fall asleep immediately. After drying his fur, Weiwei Bai did not immediately carry him away. Instead, she took her phone and went on the shopping app. Then, she started to buy cat food and snacks for the cat. She hummed a song softly. It was the cat song that she had sung during the primary election. Her voice was gentle and pleasant. It was so cheerful that it made people feel happy. Oh Jinma curled up on her lap and happened to see that there was not much money left in her account. Weiwei Bai opened the shopping cart. More than half of it was for the cat. After she finished shopping for the cat's things, she realized that there was only a little money left in her account. Weiwei Bai counted with her fingers and said, I only sold one song for 3,000 yuan. I can only get the money at the end of the month. After the cat's food and clothes, I only have enough money left to buy a box of instant noodles. Oh Jinma looked up at her with a complicated expression. Weiwei Bai lowered her head and smiled optimistically as she rubbed his face. Little Shu, why do you look so unhappy? Mommy will work hard to buy better dried fish for you. Then, she took out the dried meat from the cat's snack bag and passed it to Oh Jinma. Oh Jinma did not want to eat at first. He was not hungry. How could he eat these things? But when he thought about how little money Weiwei Bai had left, she didn't even hesitate when she bought that box of instant noodles. Oh Jinma hesitated for a moment. Other people didn't know that he was human, so it wasn't a big deal for him to eat some cat snacks. He shyly picked up the dried meat and smacked his lips. The taste was really good. Weiwei Bai's smile became even gentler. She treated cats with infinite patience. The furry little animals were too cute. She was much cuter than men. If only Oh Jinma was a cat. Oh Jinma felt a chill run down his spine. He felt as if someone was cursing him. Suddenly, the phone rang. Weiwei Bai put the phone to her ear. Due to the poor quality of the phone, the sound was amplified. Oh Jinma heard the other side vaguely saying that they were going to reject Weiwei Bai's song. The smile on Weiwei Bai's face faded a little, but she was very calm, as if she was not surprised at all. The person on the other end suddenly hesitated. Actually, your song is very well written. Oh Jinma frowned. Of course, Weiwei Bai's song was well written. Selling a song for 3,000 was a cheap price. Furthermore, it was a robbery price to take advantage of a newcomer who was in need of money. Even so, he was rejected. It didn't make sense. Then, with his sharp cat ears, he suddenly heard the person on the other end say, "You have offended someone. Someone wants to make it impossible for you to survive in this industry. Everyone has to give face to each other, so you should change your career." Weiwei Bai's face turned pale. After a moment of silence, she said, "I won't tell anyone. Can I trouble you to reveal a name?" The person on the other end hesitated again. Please don't say that I said it. Ojinma. Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. She lowered her eyes, and there was a hint of gloominess in her eyes. I understand. Thank you for the reminder. Chapter 1150. Wei Wei Bai hung up the phone and stared blankly at the wall. She was in a daze. Ojinma was filled with doubt and anger. He did not let Wei Wei Bai down at all. That person was lying. He did not do such a thing. Damn it. Why did he reject someone else's song and frame him? If he found out who framed him, he would make sure that the asterisk starred would not be able to survive. Ojinma saw the sadness in Wei Wei Bai's eyes. He quickly placed his 2 paws on her arm and shook it. Meow, it's not me. I'm so busy. Why would I have the time to torture you? Wei Wei Bai woke up with a start. The sadness on her face disappeared and she smiled at Ojinma. Xiao Shu, are you worried about me? It's okay. It's just a small setback. If you don't have 3,000 yuan, I'll go to work tomorrow. I won't let you go hungry. Ojinma bared his teeth at her. Meow, who told you that? Stupid woman. Call him and scold him. He would immediately explain that he had never done such a lowly thing. Why was she not angry at all? Was she used to being bullied? Ojinma looked at her in disappointment. Seeing that she did not seem to care that she was banned and even started to tidy up the papers on the table, he bit her finger and rubbed it. Idiot. Why are you so stupid when you're banned? Don't you know how to resist? Wei Wei Bai frowned. Xiao Shu, you're hurting me. Ojinma instinctively loosened his teeth and turned to face her with his butt. She did not know what was good for her. Why was he worried? Wei Wei Bai patted his head. He flung her away. Don't touch me. He was extremely arrogant. Wei Wei Bai did not care and started to write the song. Under the light, her side profile was delicate and serious. Her slender and fair fingers held the pen and wrote a piece of music on the paper. Ojinma turned to look at her. His feelings towards her were getting more and more complicated. The more he understood a woman, the less disgust he had for her. During the time when she had requested to date him, he had wondered how there could be such an annoying and scheming woman in this world. However, after turning into a cat, he saw a different side of her. Talented, gentle, and fond of cats. He realized that his first impression of her might have been too arbitrary and overboard. Maybe she really liked him at that time, to the point that she lost her mind? Ojinma was confident that he had the charisma to drive people crazy. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt that Wei Wei Bai's threat to him at that time was actually justified. Perhaps it was because he was too nice that she was going crazy. Ojinma looked at Wei Wei Bai sympathetically. A trace of sadness and guilt appeared on her pancake-like cat face. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 0. Wei Wei Bai, who was in the midst of writing a song, looked at Zero's favorability and felt smug. Tongzi, didn't I tell you that my charm is unstoppable? Just take it off and your favorability will increase. The system looked at the guilt on big-faced cat's face. Why did it feel like this cat didn't mean that at all? Also, host, are you proud of taking off your clothes to seduce others? Can you not be so proud of such a despicable trick? Wei Wei Bai yawned. It was about time to get to 0. There was plenty of time anyway. Ojinma couldn't run away even if he turned into a cat, so she wasn't afraid of not getting enough favorability. Wei Wei Bai was in a very good mood. She picked up Ojinma and put him in the cat bed. Then she patted his head. Time to sleep, good night. Ojinma's eyes couldn't help but follow her. He looked at her feet that were wearing slippers. Her exposed ankles were very white and cute. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. // transmigration system, male god, come here. The download address is at https://www. Sashu. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 1151. He thought back to the scene he had just seen. That impact had suddenly hit him, and he had only just realized it now. It was the first time he had seen a woman's naked body so directly. After all, as an angel, he was afraid that his image would be ruined. He didn't even dare to download adult films. He could hold it in even more than a monk. Oh, Jinma felt the fire in his body come back to life. He felt his nose wet and quickly reached out to touch it. Luckily, there was no nosebleed. Oh, Jinma waited for a while before hesitantly jumping onto the bed and looking at her. She looked quite good sleeping. She didn't have the bad habit of grinding her teeth or snoring at all. She was quiet, pretty, and clean. Her skin was as soft as jelly. He lowered his head and couldn't help but lick it. It wasn't sweet and tasteless, but it was quite nice to lick. Oh, Jinma trembled. What was he doing? Wasn't it perverted to be indecent to a sleeping girl in the middle of the night? Oh, Jinma immediately jumped off the bed as if he had seen a ghost. He was irritated and walked around in circles. He walked until his head was dizzy. He rushed to the door and jumped up to open the door. In the end, he bumped into the door. His head was almost crippled by the impact. Oh, Jinma covered his head. He bent his legs and staggered forward a few steps. He realized that he couldn't walk on his 2 legs. He had no choice but to walk on all 4s. Then, he glanced at Wei Wei Bai on the bed. He hesitated for a while before holding his breath and silently climbing up the window. Oh, Jinma decided that he had to go back. This was the 3rd time he had transmigrated into this big-faced cat. Perhaps he would transmigrate into a cat again in the future. He couldn't put himself here. Oh, Jinma had a strong sense of insecurity in his heart. He still felt that he had to raise such an important cat himself. Although he felt sorry for Wei Wei Bai, he still climbed over the window and looked at Wei Wei Bai's quiet sleeping face. After looking for a while, he sighed and suppressed the trace of guilt in his heart. Then, he followed the pipe and ran down. He quickly disappeared into the darkness of the night. However, the warm images of him interacting with Wei Wei Bai began to appear in his mind. He probably wouldn't cross paths with her anymore. Oh, Jinma thought so, but for some reason, he felt a little sad. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 5. Wei Wei Bai was in a deep sleep. When she heard the notification, she wiped her saliva and turned around to continue sleeping. The system had dark circles under its eyes. It ate the leftover potato chips from the previous world, wondering if it should remind the host that the male lead had run away. But seeing the host sleeping like a pig, in the end, the system decided to let her have a good rest, as if. The system munched on potato chips. Wei Wei Bai suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes were clear and filled with killing intent. 004, you're stealing my snacks again. The host was still so stingy. It was relieved. It was only then that Wei Wei Bai realized where her cat was. The new cat slave Wei Wei Bai jumped up murderously. Where's my cat? Where's my little tree? The system was stunned as it watched her open the door and run out. It immediately said, "Clothes, put on your clothes." Wei Wei Bai rushed back to change. Which cat thief came in? Why didn't I know? The system told her that Oh Jinma ran off by himself. Wei Wei Bai staggered and leaned against the door with a sad face. Am I not good enough to him? He even wants to abandon me. The system said, this is pretty good. For a cat, Wei Wei Bai was very thoughtful. Wei Wei Bai lowered its head. Its face was sad and gloomy. The system knew that some people really liked their pets and treated them as family. It was just about to comfort its sad host. But it heard the host muttering numbers. 1,500, 2,300, 2,800, $2,853.32. Wei Wei gloomily raised her head, a ghostly fire burning in her eyes. I spent 28.53. 32 renminbi on him, and he actually ran away like that. Don't you feel embarrassed if you don't spit out the money for me? System. Seeing that the host was so stingy that she forgot to worry, it suddenly felt relieved. Oh Jinmo ran back to his house happily. After running for half the night, he suddenly realized that his house was too far away. The distance between the slums and the wealthy was like the Milky Way. His legs were about to break from exhaustion. Oh Jinma had no choice but to run to Jiang Ro's house, which was closer. It was not easy to see Jiang Ro's house, and this was with his money. After all, he only had one sister, so it was okay to treat her better. Moreover, his sister was kind and gentle. Even if he was a stray, she would still take him in. Oh Jin-ma climbed over the windowsill with difficulty and was about to jump into the house. Just as he was about to jump in, he heard his sister, Jiang-ro, throwing a tantrum. A minute, I got someone to ban that way by. Oh Jin-ma, ? Jiang-ro held a glass of red wine and sneered. What's the point of saying that I plagiarized? What's wrong with me using her song? Shouldn't she be grateful to me, a little diva, for singing her song? Oh Jin-ma. // Chapter 1152. In front of Jiang-ro was her mother. The middle-aged Jiang-la was wearing a nightgown that was gorgeously dressed. The jewelry on her hands and neck were all given to her by Oh Jin-mo on his birthday. Jiang-la frowned as she painted her wrinkled fingernails. All right, Xiao-ro, don't use your brother's name to block others. Be careful not to let him find out. Jiang-ro finished the wine in one gulp and said with a smile, My brother dotes on me so much, why would he be angry with me? I pretend to be honest and weak in front of him. All men like to have an obedient, sensible, and pure sister. She was indeed pretty, so it was easy for her to pretend to be cute. Jiang-ro cupped her face. When Dad brought him home, I knew he was a genius when I listened to his songs in the piano room. That's why I deliberately got close to him. Jiang-la sneered. You've been the most scheming since you were young. Jiang-ro's expression changed. So what if I'm scheming? Without my scheming, would you be able to live such a good life now? Jiang-la's smile became gentle. All right, I know you've been under a lot of pressure recently. Don't lose your temper. You were indeed scheming back then, that's why your brother trusts you so much now. Jiang-ro was proud when she thought of that incident. She poured herself another glass of wine. This was Oh Jin-ma's wine cellar. It was extremely expensive. Before drinking, she deliberately took a photo and showed off her wealth on Weibo. With a brother who could lay golden eggs, she was able to navigate the entertainment industry with ease. Back then, my brother wanted to enter Enchanting Entertainment. He thought it would be difficult, but I know that the company had already contacted him several times and planned to sign him with the best contract. At that time, Oh Jin-ma was brimming with talent and the songs he wrote were simply epic-making. But he didn't know why he felt that no company wanted him. Jiang-ro also received a call from Enchanting Entertainment. Only then did she know that Enchanting Entertainment was sincere and wanted to sign Oh Jin-ma. An evil thought flashed through her mind and she immediately rejected Enchanting Company. They said that Oh Jin-ma looked down on their company. Enchanting Company was considered the leading company in the entertainment industry. Her bad attitude made Enchanting Company very angry. But because of Oh Jin-ma's talent, Enchanting Corporation still called several times to ask for cooperation. The conditions were better and better each time. Because Oh Jin-ma was busy writing songs, she often locked herself in the piano room for the whole day. She didn't know about the phone call at all. He had just finished writing a few new songs and was about to go to Enchanting Company for an interview. Jiang-ro asked her mother to come forward and say that it was not easy to enter Enchanting Company. Moreover, the attitude of the people there was very bad. One needed very good connections to get in. Oh Jin-ma, this naive and sweet, actually believed it. Later, she called and agreed to let Enchanting Company come over to sign the contract. Jiang-ro smiled proudly. My brother still thinks that he was able to enter Enchanting Company back then because of his mother. Jiang-la smiled as well. You're so smart. Jiang-ro said, he's so gullible. Although Dad said that he lived abroad since he was young and then brought him back, I always felt that he was more like a country boy. A small decorative flower pot fell from the window. Jiang-ro suddenly stood up and looked at the window fiercely. Who's there? But she saw a pair of amber eyes that were so angry that they were about to burn. Jiang-ro's scalp tensed up. The color of the eyes was the same as her brother's. Chapter 1153. Jiang-ro looked in fear and saw a grayish-blue short-haired cat lying on the windowsill. Its fur was standing on end and it was glaring at her fiercely. It hated her like a rat. Jiang Ro heaved a sigh of relief. She thought it was her brother. He heard what she said. She still relied on O Jinma for her life. The O family had already declined. Although her cheap father was once powerful, he still ruined himself because of gambling and smoking marijuana. He dragged the family into the abyss. Later on, that cheap father committed suicide. If this family didn't have O Jinma's explosive songwriting talent, how could it be more glorious than before? Therefore, she definitely had to maintain a beautiful and pure appearance in front of O Jinma. After Jiang Ro heaved a sigh of relief, she was furious. She had a bad temper. She ran over angrily and grabbed the cat's neck with one hand. She dug her sharp nails into the cat's neck and sneered, "Where did this stray cat come from? It's so dirty. Let me wash it for you." O Jinma only felt her nails digging into his neck. It was so painful that his whole body trembled. He meowed and slapped the back of Jiang Ro's hand with his cat paw. Jiang Ro flinched. There was blood on the back of her hand. Her smile turned sinister and she immediately rushed out of the door. There was a fountain in the courtyard. She immediately pressed the cat into the water. O Jinma was now a cat that was afraid of water. He was drowned by the water. His body was about to explode. The pain, suffocation, and the intense pain of death attacked him. Jiang Ro scolded loudly, "You dare to scratch me, you'd asterisk emin cat." There was no trace of her usual gentle and pure appearance. She was vicious and ruthless. Her methods were cruel and inhumane. O Jinma struggled in the water. He was in pain and angry. It was fake. She was gentle and friendly to him. It was just because he was valuable. It was also fake that she worked hard for him when he was still a newcomer and let him enter the biggest company. That opportunity was his to begin with. It wasn't given by Jiang Ro and her mother. When he was brought back, he saw his younger sister who was 1 year younger than him. As for Jiang La, who was the main wife, she was actually feeling guilty. After all, his mother was a mistress. Because his mother had died in a car accident, his father had brought him home. After returning, he was very careful, afraid that Jiang La would see him as a thorn in his side. At first, it was true. Later on, for some reason, Jiang Ro started to treat him better. He thought that she was very kind and was glad that his sister was such an easy woman to get along with. The results were all fake. At this moment, O Jinma's pain in his heart was greater than his physical pain. He felt as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. He felt as if he had become a joke. Water entered his nose and mouth. He was in so much pain that he didn't even have the strength to struggle. This was the first time he was so close to death. Suddenly, Jiang La shouted, "Xiao Ro, do you still want to eat supper? Is the cat dead? If it's dead, throw it away. Don't dirty the water." When Jiang Ro heard this, her attention was diverted. O Jinma immediately seized the opportunity to survive. His limbs exploded with the strength to survive. He jumped up from the water and jumped onto Jiang Ro's face. Then he clawed down viciously. Jiang Ro let out a scream. She grabbed O Jinma and threw him out. O Jinma was thrown to the ground heavily. He couldn't help but whimper in pain. Jiang Ro touched the blood on her face. She, who valued her face the most, was almost crazy. She ran over to O Jinma and wanted to trample him to death. O Jinma endured the pain and immediately jumped up from the ground. Then he ran out at the bottom to record this chapter. Chapter 1154. It took him a lot of effort to jump up the wall. When he turned around, he saw that Jiang Ro could not catch up with him. For the first time, he was glad that he was a cat. He jumped down the wall and finally staggered weakly. A car's headlights shone and a car sped over. It knocked O Jinma out of the way. The car passed by without stopping. O Jinma was knocked to the side of the road, his body twitching. Although he jumped onto the front of the car at the last moment, the momentum of the car still sent him flying. The pain of being beaten up by Jiang Ro and the impact of the car made him completely paralyzed. O Jinma bent his back, his body twitching and trembling. He suddenly thought of Wei Bai. At that time, he had just turned into a cat. He was almost killed by the car, but Wei Bai rushed over without hesitation and hugged him, protecting him. At that time, her embrace was so warm and soft, giving him a huge sense of security. Oh Jinma did not know if he would die. His mind was in a mess. In the dark night, his small body was soaked in blood. The pain slowly disappeared, but the cold and wet enveloped him. He then realized that he had lost a lot of blood and his fur was soaked and soft. Oh Jinma opened his mouth weakly. His lively eyes slowly lost their light. If he could not return to his body, he would probably die in the dark night where no one would know. He suddenly trembled uncontrollably. Would Wei Wei Bai come to save him? Would she already know that he had escaped? Would she come out to find him? Or would she be angry at him and not want him anymore? Oh Jinma thought that he was a joke. He was so desperate that he hoped that a woman he did not like would come to save him. Oh Jinma's vision started to turn dark. He seemed to hear hurried footsteps. He vaguely heard Wei Wei Bai's voice. Little tree, little tree. Oh Jinma felt that he was really going to die. He was hallucinating before he died. Suddenly, he raised his head and struggled to open his mouth. Meow, it seemed to be responding to those illusions. Oh Jinma leaned his head against the cold ground. Before he died, he realized that Wei Wei Bai was a woman who liked him so much that she dared to threaten him. How adorable! At least she wouldn't lie to him. She would not stab him in the back. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 10. Suddenly, a pair of hands hugged him gently. The warm and familiar embrace stunned Oh Jinma. She trembled as she gently held him in her warm embrace. Sapling! Her voice trembled and choked. Oh Jinma opened his mouth weakly, but he couldn't make a sound like a cat. Cold tears fell onto the top of his head. He tugged at the corner of his mouth, but he didn't cry. Why was she crying? Women were indeed sentimental. Oh Jinma struggled to lift his paw and touch her arm to comfort her. However, the last claw that was raised fell down powerlessly. Before the darkness came, he was suddenly not afraid. It was as if his insecurity disappeared when he was in her arms. She would protect him. Oh Jinma had never been so sure of something. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15. Wei Wei Bai anxiously carried Oh Jinma to the veterinary hospital. The system said, if Oh Jinma doesn't wake up and maintain a healthy mental state, he won't be able to go back. This was the missing part of the reward. Wei Wei Bai asked, what if the cat dies? The system said, he might become a vegetable. Fish. Download the at https://sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Chapter 1155. You can search Transmigration System. Adonis, come to Sashu. Tell on Baidu to find the S. Wei Wei Bai swallowed the word fucked in her mouth. What kind of stupid reward was this? How was she going to get the male lead into a vegetative state? It was 3 in the morning, but the veterinary hospital was not open. Wei Wei Bai hugged Oh Jinma and felt the cat's vitality waning. Just as she was about to ask the system to look for products that could save the cat, a car suddenly stopped beside her. What are you doing here in the middle of the night? Wei Wei Bai turned around and saw the man sitting in the driver's seat. The man looked quite tall even when he was sitting. He had handsome features and his eyes were calm and clear. His tone was calm, but there was a hint of worry in his eyes. Wei Wei Bai thought for a long time, but she still couldn't remember who this guy was. The system said, Su Yuan, the doctor in charge of your concussion. Wei Wei Bai said, I don't have any impression of this random person. Wei Wei Bai then turned to Su Yedwan and looked like she was about to cry. Dr. Su, my cat is dying, but the hospital is not open. Su Yedwan saw the bleeding cat in her hands and saw that she was alone in the middle of the night. He was worried. If you trust me, get in the car. I'll take a look at your cat. Wei Wei Bai quickly opened the door to the passenger seat and sat in. She said anxiously, of course I trust you. Let's go quickly. Su Yedwan frowned. Some doctors weren't good people. Why wasn't she worried that he was a bad guy? Wei Wei Bai had the information given by the system. Su Yedwan had been a decent person since he was young. Even when he was a doctor, he served the people. Who wouldn't trust this kind of man? Su Yedwan quickly returned home. It was too late to go back to the hospital now. His house was nearby. He carried the cat and opened his drawer to take out the surgical tools he usually used for practice. There were also some painkillers. Wei Wei Bai saw that he was very skilled. Dr. Su, were you a veterinarian before? Su Yedwan's fingers froze. No, but I used to operate on animals to practice my hand. He picked up some injured stray cats and dogs to suture. Only after they were saved would they be given away for adoption. Therefore, he was very experienced in treating animals. Wei Wei Bai also found the information about the cats and dogs he had saved before. She immediately felt relieved. Su Yedan checked the cat's body. Fortunately, its bones were not broken. However, there was a large wound in his flesh. If he was not sutured quickly, he would die from excessive blood loss. He glanced at Wei Wei Bai. Her face was deathly pale, and her slender body was frail and on the verge of collapsing. She looked at the cat worriedly. Su Yedan suddenly felt a sense of responsibility and decided not to save the cat. He was worried that the next person he had to rescue would be the heartbroken Wei Wei Bai. Go outside, the scene is a little bloody. Su Yehua said softly. Wei Wei Bai shook her head and reached out a finger to gently stroke O Jinma's paw. The pads of his claws were covered in blood. She said sadly, I want to accompany him. I'm not afraid. O Jinma's drooping ears twitched. He seemed to want to wake up, but he could not. Su Yedan nodded. Then he put on gloves, disinfected and started to clean the cat's wound. Then, he operated and sutured. The series of actions was smooth and fluid. The surgery was very successful. O Jinma even woke up. He struggled to open his eyes. His eyes were wet and very pitiful. Then he saw Wei Wei Bai beside him. She looked at him with a worried face and red eyes. O Jinma stared at her for a long time. The moisture in his eyes finally condensed into tears and fell. He stretched out his soft cat paws and placed them on her fingers with great effort. He meowed softly. Next time, I won't make you sad. Transmigration System, Adonis, come here. Transmigration System, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com//transmigration system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com Transmigration System, Adonis, come here at the bottom to record this reading. Transmigration System, Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 1156. O Jinma didn't know how he fainted. After he woke up, he stared at the ceiling for a long time before realizing that he was lying on a bed. His own bed. O Jinma's breathing became heavy and chaotic. He thought about his experience of turning into a cat. He didn't know what happened to the cat after he left. Would Wei Wei Bai be sad? He really believed that Wei Wei Bai treated the cat as family. She could find him in the middle of the night and even find a doctor to save him. He didn't know how much effort she had put in. He thought about how Wei Wei Bai might be carrying the cat and running on the deserted streets in the middle of the night. He felt a lump in his throat and his eyes became wet. He had never been treasured so much before. O Jinma got up and went to brush his teeth and wash his face in a daze. He looked at himself in the mirror. His black hair was messy and his amber eyes had a kind of pure charm. The corners of his mouth twitched and the purity in his eyes changed. They became gloomy and cold, and even a kind of emotionless abyss. O Jinma wanted to make his eyes look closer to the little angels. He practiced his eye muscles for a long time. Now that he didn't pretend, he was gloomy and cold. He looked at himself in the mirror for a long time before picking up a towel to wipe his face. After throwing the towel away, he walked to the living room. Then he walked to the door and started to change the passcode. Jiang Ro and Jiang La knew the passcode to his door. After changing the passcode, he called the director of good songs. Is Wei Wei Bai in the list of qualified contestants? No. O Jinma laughed coldly and suddenly said angrily, how could I tell you that such a good contestant couldn't enter the competition? Who told you? My manager? O Jinma didn't expect that Jiang Ro wasn't only in the industry. She didn't want people to accept Wei Wei Bai's songs. She even interfered in the good songs competition that he had just participated in. If it was in the past, he definitely wouldn't have thought so much. But when he started to investigate, he found out that his agent had already hooked up with his good sister. Oh, Jinma was just not in charge. He likes to write songs, compose songs, and sing songs. All of these required a lot of time and brainpower to create. As a result, he didn't care about anything. But that didn't mean that he was a fool. When he was in the countryside, he had suffered a lot to live a good life. He matured faster than many of his peers. She even had to maintain the image of a gentle angel for so many years without breaking down. It was not something a normal person could do. Oh, Jinma's thick eyelashes drooped down, and his amber eyes gave off a bone-chilling coldness. He tapped on his phone and made a call to the higher-ups of Sanshin Company. He fired his manager. All the bad things that Jiang Ro had done under his name must have been done by his agent. Otherwise, why would those companies listen to her? Oh, Jinma decided to fire his manager. He flipped to Jiang Ro's first hit song. He put on his headphones and crossed his arms as he sat on the chair. The song was sung by Jiang Ro's sweet voice. It was sweet and disgusting. He sat on the chair expressionlessly and listened to the song. Then he took out a pen and started to write the song's score on a piece of paper. He knew Jiang Ro's standards very well, but he didn't pay attention to it before. And he felt that no matter what, she was still his sister, so he had to stand by her family when something happened. That was why he never cared about Wei Wei Bai's plagiarism. Chapter 1157. After all, at that time, he felt that Wei Wei Bai was a scheming woman. She was someone who posed a threat to him. He instinctively and selfishly avoided the question of plagiarism and didn't think too much about it. After he finished writing the song, he tapped the pen lightly on the paper. Then he took off his earphones and picked up his phone to call Jiang Ro. Jiang Ro picked up the call quickly and said in a sweet voice, "Brother, you're calling me so early in the morning. Do you miss me?" Oh, Jinma heard her voice. He thought of the scene last night when she grabbed his neck and pressed him into the fountain. His chest tightened, he felt a sharp pain, and he had the urge to vomit blood. He took a deep breath and resisted the urge to strangle her. "Didn't I ask you to give me the original manuscript of Tender Love last time?" She didn't reply to his private message. Jiang Ro was silent for a while before she smiled and said, "Brother, you know my personality. I don't know where I threw it after I finished writing it." Oh, Jinma's eyes were half closed. His back was facing the light, and his handsome and gentle face was cold. He lowered his voice. It was still gentle, but there was a hint of sarcasm. "Oh, this song of yours is in the plagiarism case. How can you throw away such important evidence? Don't tell me you don't have the original manuscript?" Jiang Ro froze and suddenly laughed. "Brother, what are you talking about? How can I not have the original manuscript? Do you suspect me of plagiarism?" Oh, Jinma smiled coldly and his tone became gentler. "How can I suspect you? Someone is framing my sister, so of course I have to seek justice." To seek justice. Cold and heavy, as if he was going to bite someone's bones. Jiang Ro was delighted when she heard this. Her brother still doted on her. He actually wanted to go against Wei Wei Bai. She had long disliked Wei Wei Bai. After all, the song that made her popular was Wei Wei Bai's. If she didn't completely suppress Wei Wei Bai, she would never be able to make a comeback. If she were to never be able to rise again, then she would never be safe. She rolled her eyes and immediately said, "Brother, I know where the original manuscript is. I'm going to look for it now." Oh, Jinma was expressionless and said faintly, "Go and look for it." After that, he hung up the phone. Jiang Ro didn't think much of it. She didn't have the original manuscript. She had stolen Wei Wei Bai's song. It was the song that Bai Weiwei composed, and all the manuscripts were brought over. Because he was afraid that people would know that the song was written by Bai Weiwei. She put the completed song. He burned the paper Bai Weiwei used to write the song. She couldn't let Wei Wei Bai have evidence to prove that the song was hers. Jiang Ro held the pen and racked her brains. She was very clear about the process of writing a song. She took out a few pieces of paper and started to write a few broken pieces of the song. Then she wrote the completed song on the last piece of paper. She was very scheming and rubbed the paper. She rubbed it until it was old and dirty. Then, she took photos of the papers and sent them to Ojinma. "Brother, I threw the papers under the sofa. They're all dirty." After sending the photos, Jiang Ro sneered. "Wei Bai, if my brother wants to go against you, do you think you can make a comeback?" She was just using Ojinma's name. No one dared to buy Wei Bai's song. Not to mention Ojinma himself. After sending the photos, Jiang Ro happily went to do her makeup. She still had to buy clothes with her friends. This year's Fashion Week's latest spring clothes were newly released. Chapter 1158. Ojinma closed his eyes. The image of Wei Bai's red eyes from last night kept replaying in his mind. And the way she looked so worried that she was about to cry. There were some unbearable emotions surging in his heart. He couldn't explain what it was, but there was one feeling that was very clear. He didn't want to see her in such pain anymore. His phone beeped with a message notification. Ojinma looked at his phone coldly. After he turned it on, he saw the song score that Jiang Ro had sent him. He laughed in disdain after reading half of it, and there was a sharp anger in his cold eyes. In the final song score, there were even 3 wrong notes at the climax. Not to mention that there were only a few pieces of incomplete music scores. For such a complete song, who knew how long it would take to complete the song from the first note to the final song? These few pieces of paper that were fabricated at the last minute definitely weren't enough. Of course, there were geniuses who could complete the song within 5 minutes. But Jiang Ro wasn't that kind of person. She didn't write that song herself. That meant that Wei Bai wrote it herself. The songs that Wei Bai wrote after that were more mature than this song. The style was also more refreshing and elegant. She had been improving all this time. As long as she was given a stage and a chance to debut, she would definitely become popular. Ojinma pursed his thin lips and said softly, "This time, no one can stop you from debuting." This was his way of repaying his debt of gratitude. Ojinma wasn't sure if he was repaying his debt of gratitude. Ojinma had a fan meeting today. He smiled until his face was stiff. His hands also hurt from signing autographs. When he finally managed to get away, it was already past 7 at night. He was still worried about the cat in Wei Bai's hands. But if he suddenly called her, it would be very abrupt. Also, he thought about how Wei Bai was still eating instant noodles. He didn't know if she had the money for the cat's medical bills. If she didn't, would she need to borrow it? Ojinma hesitated for a moment before he drove to Wei Bai's apartment. He saw that her rented apartment was brightly lit. He knew she was here. Ojinma got out of the car. He was wearing sunglasses, a mask, and a cap. They were basically fully armed. If he didn't do that, it would be troublesome if someone recognized him. He leaned against the car and paced back and forth a few times before finally coming up with an excuse. Ojinma immediately quickened his pace and rushed towards her door. He looked around, but there was no one. He was afraid that Wei Bai would mistake him for a criminal and refuse to open the door. He took off his mask and sunglasses, then took a deep breath. He didn't know why he was nervous, but he raised his hand and knocked on the door that didn't have a doorbell. The door did not open. Ojinma was not discouraged and continued to knock on the door. Finally, the door opened a crack, but the chain at the back of the door was not unlocked. A pair of eyes cautiously peeked out from behind the door. It was clear and beautiful, almond-shaped, and attractive as if it was filled with fragments of light. Wei Bai seemed a little surprised. She frowned. "Ojinma." Ojinma's fingers were clenched unnaturally. He instinctively revealed a harmless, angelic smile. "Wei Bai, I'm here to inform you that you've passed the preliminary audition for the good song. You'll be on TV in 3 days." Wei Bai was silent for a while before she said indifferently, "Thank you for informing me. Actually, you could have called me." Ojinma felt that his palms were sweating. He was clearly on cloud 9 in front of 100,000 people singing together, but he didn't feel nervous at all. But why was he nervous when facing Wei Bai? His Adam's apple bobbed up and down before he said shamelessly, "Can I go in? I need to tell you the flow of the good song in detail. // you'll be able to see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like." Chapter 1159. Wei Wei Bai was extremely vigilant. It's not appropriate for a man and a woman to be alone. I'll just call the production crew and ask. Why was she so guarded against him? Oh, Jinma was a little confused. She was clearly so nice to him. Suddenly, he realized that she was nice to him because he was a cat. Wei Wei Bai didn't know that he was Little Tree. This name didn't sound old-fashioned at all. Oh, Jinma even thought that it sounded quite nice. Oh, Jinma shook his head. He was really bewitched. No matter if it was a big tree or a small tree, it was extremely old-fashioned. Why would he think that it sounded nice? Oh, Jinma pursed his lips and suddenly turned his head. His expression changed. Oh no, someone is coming. They will recognize me. Wei Wei Bai frowned. After a moment of silence, she opened the door. Oh, Jinma immediately rushed in and closed the door forcefully. Actually, there was no one outside. As soon as he fooled around, Bai Wei Wei opened the door. Indeed, she was the most soft-hearted. Oh, Jinma held back his laughter and then turned around with a serious expression. He raised his head and pretended to look around casually. He realized that the cat was gone. Could it be that the cat had died from its injuries? Oh, Jinma's heart tightened, but he said casually, "Where's your cat?" It ran away from home. Wei Wei Bai sat on the chair and picked up her chopsticks. When she heard his words, her fingers froze, but she only twitched the corners of her mouth. "It's injured and needs to be changed. I'll leave it with the doctor. I'll go and pick it up after dinner." Oh, Jinma stood at the door. He was a little uneasy. When he wasn't a cat, he didn't seem to get along well with Wei Wei Bai. He had a lot to say. He wanted to say that he knew that she didn't wrongly accuse Jiang Ro. That song was indeed stolen by Jiang Ro. He also wanted to say thank you. But his mouth was stuffed with a bunch of words, all stimulated by her lowering her head to eat instant noodles. His gaze rested on her fair and slender fingers. She picked up the chopsticks and slowly ate the noodles. It was an unhealthy instant noodles. Her expression was calm, but she ate it very seriously. Oh, Jinma's throat was dry. "Why are you eating this?" After saying this, he wanted to beat himself up. As expected, Wei Wei Bai looked up faintly. "I don't have money. If it's an eyesore, you can help me out a little." If the song could not be sold, of course there would be no money. On the other hand, Oh, Jinma, this big-faced cat, had eaten until she was broke. It was good enough that she had instant noodles to eat. Oh, Jinmo realized that Wei Wei Bai was much more casual with him. She wasn't nervous at all. She wasn't blushing at all. She wasn't trying to maintain her elegance either. His heart was gloomy, but he took a few steps forward, snatched the instant noodles from her, and threw them into the nearby trash can. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. The trash can was full of soup, so it was very troublesome to clean it up. Young Master O did not feel that he was causing trouble for others at all. Instead, he felt that he was very handsome. He pulled down his mask, revealing his eyebrows and the faint outline of his face. They were all exquisite and perfect. Oh, Jinma had been playing the role of an angel for so many years. His perfect face, which was inclined towards the androgynous side of the 2D world, had a great advantage. Basically, his smile was more gentle. Standing there, he looked like a little prince without wings. Oh, Jinma looked up and said in a muffled voice, "I'll treat you to a meal. Let's go." This was the first time he had invited a girl to a meal, so he was a little nervous. He did not even know that his attitude was especially arrogant. Wei Wei Bai glanced at the small table. Some soup had spilled on it, but she took a tissue and wiped it as if nothing had happened. Then she turned to look at Oh Jinma with a strange look in her eyes. To read the at https://www.sashu.com/ to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https:// Sashu. Calm that you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.